It's the Smucker's Uncrustables podcast with your host, Uncrustables. Okay, today's guest is rough around the edges. Please welcome Crust.
Thanks for having me.
Today's topic, he's round with soft, pillowy bread.
Hey.
Filled with delicious PB&J.
Are you talking about yourself?
And you can take him anywhere.
Why'd you invite?
And we are out of time.
Are you really cutting me off?
Uncrustables are the best part of the sandwich. Sorry, Crust.
Reese's peanut butter cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
McCrispy strips are now at McDonald's. I hope you're ready for the most dippable chicken in McDonald's history. Dip it in all the sauces. Dip it in that hot sauce in your bag. Dip it in your McFlurry. Your dip is your business. McCrispy strips at McDonald's.
The warmer from Evo. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Guns Guns Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. He's got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be chatting in segment number 2 with Rocco Miller. He does great work over at Bracketeer.org. We're going to be chatting with him about what he's all been noticing in terms of the bracketology landscape of things, as he does a great job with his bracketology over at Bracketeer.org. We saw the initial 16 teams from the selection committee get unveiled this weekend, so we're going to be diving in there, get some of his thoughts, if there were any surprises, how that compares with his bracket, if he's going to be making any adjustments as a result of that. And then on top of that, we're going to be taking a look at some of the teams that are going to be playing on Sunday, a little bit of a lay of the land with the American Conference as well, with the American being a conference that is going to have a lot of teams in action on Sunday, and he will actually be at the South Florida versus Florida Atlantic game. So lots of American Conference chatter in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we got ourselves just a big, giant wall of college basketball on Saturday. Let's recap it as best we can, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Now, one thing that was absent from the Saturday college basketball card was best team in terms of cover rate in all of college basketball, Minnesota. We are going to be seeing them on Sunday, but the next best team in Texas A&M Corpus Christi, they continue to cover. They're now 16-5 against the spread. They take down Texas A&M Commerce 86-63, and yes, I did just lead with Texas A&M Corpus Christi. We give love to the teams that are making us money, and Texas A&M Corpus Christi, they just continue to make you money. They won the rebound battle in this game 39-18. 39-18! And then you had a big 29-point performance out of Gary Clark, just absolute domination on the glass from this Corpus Christi team. They really have been a lot of fun to take a look at, and another team to take a look at that's been fun, Richmond. 18-6-1 against the spread for them. They take down George Washington by a count of 90-74. George Washington looked like was going to be able to make a little bit of a charge in the middle of the second half. They were down 63-59 with about 9 minutes and change remaining, and for George Washington, the Revolutionaries, you shoot 11 of 27 from 3, but Richmond just oh so efficient. They win the turnover battle 7-4. They win the rebound battle 37-33, and the King, Jordan King, he was able to supply 24 points. So those two teams, they are certainly making you money, and this team right now is not. That would be the Wisconsin Badgers. They fall in overtime to Iowa by a count of 88-86, and depending upon your closing numbers against Ohio State, because a lot of books that was a non-cover, I believe that they were laying 9 to 9.5 in a lot of spots. That makes them now 0-6 against the spread in February. This team coming into February, they were doing tremendous work for you, but it has went straight down the toilet bowl there. And for Wisconsin, they lose this game despite going 7-16 from 3, but they lost at the free throw line. Iowa goes 24 of 30 at the charity stripe, 19 of 28 for Wisconsin. Wisconsin also gets demolished on the glass, losing that battle 35-32 as Owen Freeman, 20 points, 12 rebounds, instrumental for Iowa being able to get the job done. And Iowa, They have scored at least 75 points in 32 out of their last 34 home games. Iowa State, they open up as an 8-point favorite. Number comes down a little bit, so they get the cover in this one against Texas Tech. 82-74 the final. We're not used to seeing games this high scoring from Iowa State, but you had Keshawn Gilbert chip in there a 4 of 7 3-point shooting performance. He was able to put up 24 points, and for Iowa State, very efficient performance in general. They win the turnover battle by a count of 16-6. They did a really nice job of being able to hit the boards as well, winning that battle by a count of 35-34. And all of a sudden for Iowa State, they are 18-7 against the spread. It has been a tremendous season for them, and it has not been a tremendous season for these teams out there in the Big 12, as Texas and West Virginia, they are both 9-16 against the spread thus far this season. Texas, they get demolished by Houston by a count of 82-61. This Houston team just ate them alive in the second half. LJ Cryer supplies 26 points for Houston. They go 8 of 23 from 3, while Texas, they go 6 of 18 from distance, and Texas, they lose a rebound battle by a count of 45-34. They lose a turnover battle 14-8, and Jamal Shedd, he had 16 points, 6 steals, 6 assists, and 11 rebounds. So another nice performance there. And for West Virginia, they are unable to get the cover at home against Baylor, 94-81, and Baylor now 15-7-2 against the spread, as they went 12 of 32 from distance in this one. It was all about what you were able to get out of Jacoby Walter along Jaden Nunn. A combined 43 points for them, and West Virginia, it's been a dysfunctional season for them, to say the least, and that continues. And then you saw TCU with a not buzzer beater. There was 1 second remaining, but Jameer Nelson Jr., he knocks down a very clutch 3 late. TCU gets the job done on the road against Kansas State, 75-72 in a game where Kansas State shot 1 of 15 from 3-point range. You did have Mr. Tyler Perry. You've seen him on the silver screen. Now you see him on the hardwood. Be able to give you 6 of 13 from the floor and 12 of 12 at the free throw line, but 0 of 6 from 3. That might have been the biggest number in this game. And then you did see BYU go down to Oklahoma State on the road, 93-83. It's been a little bit touch and go recently for BYU and Oklahoma State. They're 11 and 14 straight up. It's been a bad year, but they have been playing a little bit better than that record. 11 of 22 from 3-point shot. Sadly, we're back below 20 games above 500 with the DK Network write-up record. We are going to look to get that back to 20 games above 500 on Sunday, as I had Oklahoma on the money line, and Oklahoma has a double-digit lead in the latter half of the first half. Things are looking very good, and then Kansas punked them in the second half. Oklahoma loses this game by a count of 67-57, and the well just simply ran dry for Oklahoma. I should have wrote up the under. I know that I should have done that, but you know what? We are going to get it back on Sunday. As for Oklahoma, 16 of 50 from the floor. They play even up on the turnovers, but they lost the battle on the glass 40-29. Still have some concerns with this Kansas team on offense, as it's not the reason why they won this game. They shot about 6 of 19 from 3, but Hunter Dickinson was able to supply the team with 20 points, 6 rebounds, and then you did have Johnny Furphy step up with 15 points, 9 rebounds. So Kansas, after they had lost 2 of their last 3 games, they were able to stop the bleeding there. And in terms of teams in the top 25 that looked very impressive, how about UConn and the way that they just go out there and completely punk Marquette? 81-53 the final. This was an absolute rear end kicking in every single facet of it. For Marquette, I have my concerns with them down low, and that's still very much a concern, as they lose a rebound battle in this one by a grand total of 45-27, but more than anything, this was just impressive from UConn. You had Donovan Clingan supply 17 points and boards. Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, they combined for 11 assists, 29 points on 4 turnovers, and for Marquette, they go 5 of 23 from 3-point range. Just thorough domination, as UConn is now 16-10 against the spread. Meanwhile, a team that has not been covering spreads out there in the Big East, that would be the DePaul Blue Demons, but they were able to cover this one as about 20 or so point underdogs. They fall to Providence by a count of 70-81, and they had to make a bonsai charge late to be able to cover this number. If you laid the points with Providence, and I did lay the 20 points with Providence, you should feel very salty, as this was a game where it looked like they were just going to run and hide. Providence was up 81-58 with about $1:32 remaining, and then DePaul runs off 12 points in the final 92 seconds to cover the number. Good grief, that was strange to say the least, as Devin Carter for Providence, he did have 31 points, but man, hard to not feel a little bit salty about that one. But if you had Creighton, this one was never in doubt. 79-57, they take it to Butler, and after it looked like Creighton had really lost their fastball towards the back half of non-conference play into the early part of conference play, seems like it's back. 8 of 25 from three-point range. Baylor Shireman, 27 points, 10 boards. Ryan Kalkbrenner gives you a pair of steals, 21 points of his own. And for Butler, it just were stuck in the mud in this one. They go 6 of 22 from three-point range, so a very good showing from Creighton on Saturday. Also a very good showing on Saturday. How about North Carolina absolutely taking it to Virginia Tech, 96-81. This is not the Virginia Tech team that we all know and love. They go just 7 of 26 from three-point range, but at Armando Bacot supplied 25 points, 12 rebounds, and he wasn't even the top rebounder on his own team as North Carolina wins the rebound battle 43-31. Harrison Ingram, 12 points, 17 rebounds. He gets it done once again. And for Virginia Tech, then a little bit of a hot and cold and just not a profitable year if you've been backing Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech against the spread now 11-14. The top cover team out there in the ACC, by the way, that would actually be Pittsburgh. They absolutely laid it on Louisville on Saturday by a count of 86-59. They're now 15-8-2 against the spread, and Blake Hinson had himself a game. Guy puts up their 41 points. For Pittsburgh, they hold Louisville to shoot just 1 of 12 from 3, while they themselves went 15 of 31 from 3-point range. So very nice grand showing there. And for Duke, they go on the road. They get a winning cover against Florida State. 76-67 the final is for Duke. They go 10 of 16 from 3-point range. You had a 8 of 11 3-point shooting performance. Jared McCain. You also had Jeremy Roach chip in there 17 points. McCain by himself has 35 points. Kyle Filipowski only had 8 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 turnovers in this game, and yet Duke was still able to get a pretty easy win and cover. So that was a very good showing from them. Dayton, they don't get a cover, but they get a win against Fordham, 78-70. Offense still clicking. Defense right now a little bit of a, shall we say, question mark with them from time to time. Alabama, there's very much question marks with regards to their defense. Their offense, it is right now number 1 on all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in Alabama. Now 16-9 against the spread. They laid on Texas A&M 100-75 for Alabama. They go 18 of 41 from 3, while Texas A&M went 4 of 23 from 3-point range. So, yeah, it's easy to be able to win a game when you have that big of a 3-point shooting disparity. For Alabama, they win the turnover battle by a count of 14-12, and to the credit of Texas A&M, they won the rebound battle 49-38. But when you can't throw a grape in the ocean, that doesn't do a lot of good for you, as Mark Sears was able to supply Alabama with 23 points. Your top cover team in the SEC thus far this season has been South Carolina, and they play a nip and tuck game against LSU, and they do not come out on the right side of it. After starting out the year 21-3, it's been back-to-back losses now for South Carolina, 64-63. LSU is able to get this one done. For LSU, they win the rebound battle 38-33 with Trey Hannibal coming in and giving the team 12 rebounds. That was absolutely massive for them. And then for South Carolina, BJ McTruck, he was able to give the team 18 points, 9 rebounds, just not a lot from the backcourt of South Carolina in this one. They go just 6 of 20 from 3-point range, and for LSU, they were able to go 5 of 13 from 3-point range, getting a nice 3 of 4 shooting performance from distance from Tyler Ward to be able to get them to the window as LSU. It's been a rough year for them, just 11-14 against the spread, but they're able to get that one in. Also, being able to get this one in on the road, that would be Illinois. 85-80, they take down Maryland. It's been a Maryland team that's been all over the place this year, and this was a game that went well over the total, despite the fact that you did not have a lot of 3-point shooting, and you had a pass from the Illinois folk to go over to Coach Kevin Willard in this game. If you saw that virtual highlight, that was very, very fascinating to say the least. But for Illinois, they go just 5 of 20 from 3-point range, but they went 32 of 36 at the free throw line. Maryland, to their credit, they go 24 of 29 at the charity stripe, with Julian Reese being able to supply the team with 18 points, 11 rebounds. And for Maryland, they actually do win the turnover battle by a count of 9-6. But for Illinois, they were able to have Terrence Shannon on their team, 27 points, and then Marcus Somas, 19 points, 12 boards. Illinois, they find a way to persevere, and they're able to get the job done. If you're wanting a team that has not been making a lot of money this year, that would be Old Missouri. It has been a 6-19 against the spread record for them thus far this season, but they do cover this one against Ole Miss, 79-73. Ole Miss gets the win. They do not get the cover, though, as they've been running out of steam a little bit recently in terms of against the spread record. And for Missouri. They shot it quite well from three-point range, 5 of 11 from distance. Meanwhile, Ole Miss, they go 11 of 21 from three. Sean East returns to the floor, 6 of 9, very nice from the floor. He was able to supply 25 points in total, and for Ole Miss, they lose the turnover battle 13-8, so that was a little bit of an issue for them. Vanderbilt was about a 20-point underdog, and they got completely trucked by Tennessee. 88-53 the final. This game was not competitive throughout, as for Vanderbilt, they go 10 of 20 at the free throw line. They shoot 33% from floor, and for Tennessee, they go 14 of 31 from three. Dalton Knecht only had to play 22 minutes in this one, as the backups played much of the second half. He was able to supply the team with 14 points. Tennessee wins the turnover battle by a count of 19-7. They actually play even up on the glass, but that's because Vanderbilt just missed so many shots that they were bound to grab a few rebounds. Arkansas was also able to give you a cover. They're now 7-18 against the spread this season, but another loss for them. Mississippi State 71-67 winners in this one, as Arkansas goes to 3 of 17 from three-point range, and reason why Mississippi State was unable to cover the 11.5 and go 19 of 32 at the free throw line, but he did have Charles Matthews supply a double-double, 17 points, 10 rebounds out of him, so a little bit of a harebrained sort of scenario, but they were able to get it done outright on the money line, and for Arkansas, they were able to get a cover. Florida, meanwhile, they continue to ascend. They take it to Georgia in the old Florida-Georgia line by a count of 88-82. For Florida, they go 9 of 24 from three, while Georgia, they go 7 of 22 from distance, and Noah Thomason was able to give Georgia 26 points in this one. And in terms of other top 25 action, as you had so many good games in this one, how about Kentucky? It has been a rough run for them recently, but if you look overall for the season, they're still sitting at 15-10 against the spread. They get a massive road win against Auburn, 70-59. The defense looked better, and it helps when Auburn goes 4 of 22 from three-point range, but it looked like they put a little bit more effort on that side of things. You had Antonio Reeves supplied the team with 22 points off the bench. Robert Dillingham gave the team 11 points, but you could tell that they were playing at a slower tempo. It worked out very well. You had Ogana Onyesu be able to supply 11 rebounds, as Kentucky wins the rebound battle in this one, so that is absolutely massive. And what else is pretty massive is the fact that Indiana State was ranked in the AP poll for the first time in Earth in 30 years. First time they were ranked since Larry Bird was in college, and now they've lost back-to-back games since becoming ranked in the top 25. Southern Illinois has been a really good cover team for you all season long. They're able to get the job done in this one by a count of 74-69. By the way, for Southern Illinois, they're now 17-8-1 against the spread. They're tied atop the conference for best cover rate with Evansville. They're 17-8 against the spread. We'll be seeing them on Sunday, but for Southern Illinois, they only go 6 of 26 from three, but you had Xavier Johnson be exactly what he needed to be, the best player out there on the floor. 21 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, just 1 turnover. And for Indiana State, they had Robbie Avila supply 30 points, 6 rebounds, but they go just 7 of 25 from three-point range. And for Indiana State, they lose their turnover battle 16-7. So Southern Illinois, they're able to keep their hot sort of ways going, and they're able to get that one done. And if you're looking at teams that have been able to cash you a whole bunch of overs thus far this season, Wright State, they have been the right team to be able to cash you overs. They're now 19 overs to 6 unders. That is the top mark in all of college basketball, and they completely lambaste Robert Morris. 101-71 for Wright State. They go 7 of 11 from three-point range. They're always open to giving you a whole bunch of offense, as every single one of the starters had at least 12 points in this one. For Robert Morris, they lose the turnover battle 14-7. They lose the rebound battle. Robert Morris says 33-23, so just very thorough domination. Denver has also been a very good over team for you, but they played a little bit more of an under on Saturday, but they do get the win, and they do get the cover against North Dakota State. 77-72 the final. They were about 2.5-point favorites, and the nation's top scorer, and Tommy Bruner, 41 big points, as North Dakota just absolutely has this game toilet bowl on them. For North Dakota State, they were up at one point 57-38 with about 13 minutes of change remaining in the second half, and then they made like your buddy at the bar and they could not close, as Bruner, he was the closer with those 41 points. So Denver, even though they don't get an over, they do get the job done, and they do get that big giant win, by the way, from teams that I was mentioning a little bit earlier. Alabama and Kentucky both have played 18 overs thus far this season to 7 unders, and Illinois, they're up to 17 overs to 8 unders thus far this season as well. If you're looking at your top under team in all of college basketball, actually both reside in the state of Illinois. So you've got Illinois, the Fighting Illini, as one of your best teams to the over thus far this season. Then the 2 Illinois schools that are directional in the OVC, Western Illinois and Eastern Illinois, are your top under teams in college basketball. Western Illinois 18 unders to 5 overs. They play another one against Tennessee State as Western Illinois goes on the road. They win this game 68-61. This was a closing total more in that neighborhood about 130, but Ryan Myers was able to put up 22 points as Western Illinois, they hold Tennessee State to 33% field goal shooting, 4 of 17 from three-point range. And for Tennessee State, they do win the rebound battle by a count of 41-39, but having Mr. Ryan Myers supply 22 points, that was good enough for Western Illinois to be able to get the cash. And then Eastern Illinois, they are now up to 16 unders, 2 pushes, and 5 overs, 72-57. They get the job done against Lindenwood. This was a total of about 131F, and you saw some okay three-point shooting compared to what these teams typically do. They combine to shoot about 34.5% from three-pointers, but Lindenwood, 19 made field goals and 17 turnovers. That's just not going to cut it. Lindenwood also lost the battle on glass, 39-37, as you had a nice double-double, 11.7 rebounds out of Kendall Davis, the transfer from LIU for Eastern Illinois, to cash that under and to be able to get to the window. And Vermont, they have really been able to pick it up recently as well, and they're a very good under team. They now have 18 unders to 7 overs. You saw Vermont be able to get the win and the cover against Maine by a count of 68-57, as Maine, they didn't get Maine because they went 4 of 17 from three-point range, while Vermont, they were able to do a good job getting Shamir Bogues going, 21 points, 7 boards. Vermont, they win the rebound battle 33-32, and for Maine, with them not being able to win that turnover battle, put them in some dire straits. This was the top under team in all of college basketball for the longest time, but Dartmouth is up to now 6 overs to 14 unders, and this one was a very clear over. They play against Cornell, and Cornell wins but does not cover, 89-80 against Dartmouth. Dartmouth went 13 of 27 from three-point range, an absolute explosion from them. They do lose the turnover battle 17-7, and that does ultimately cost them the game, but hey, you were able to get Dartmouth going for a little bit of production. That is something that we do like to see. If you're looking at teams that have not been able to make you money thus far this season, Missouri is very clearly one of them, but Michigan is as well, and Michigan just completely melts down in this game against Michigan State. This thing is tied up with about 7 minutes and change remaining, and Michigan does not score a point for the final 7 minutes and I believe 20 seconds in this one. 7:01. So Michigan loses by a count of 73-63. Their last made points were Will Shedder's layup to make it 63-63 with 7:01 remaining, and then they toilet bowled it. For Michigan State, they win this game going 2 of 14 from three-point range of Michigan. I would mention a record, but the record is this: pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. 8-18 straight up, and with them starting out 3-0 straight up, they are now 5-18 in their last 23 games. It's not looking good for our good friend Juwan Howard, as Michigan in this game had 22 turnovers. So that was not great to say the least. Michigan now 7-19 against the spread. Arkansas, they continue to be rough at 7-18 against the spread, but Detroit, they've been able to cover a few numbers recently. Saturdays was not one of them. They are now 8-20 against the spread, but they do have a straight-up win. 83-69. Fort Wayne goes on the road. That's about an 8.5 point favorite. They're able to get it done. As for IPFW, they didn't do a great job on the glass. They won that battle 26-25, and Jaden Stone was able to give Detroit 27 points in this one, but Quentin Morton Robinson, he supplies 24 points. He goes 5 of 8 from three-point range, considering the rest of the team, when they combined 3 of 17 from three-point range. They clearly needed that, and they were able to get that. For IUPUI, they are putting the PU in IUPUI. They are now 6-19 against the spread. They lose by 48 points against Oakland, 107-59. Oakland was the least efficient defense at home in all of college basketball this season going in, and the only guy for IUPUI that gave you any sort of offense was DJ Jackson off the bench. He was able to give you 17 points, and past that, nobody could muster up anything. IUPUI loses the battle on the glass, 37-25. They lose their turnover battle, 13-10. IUPUI goes 5 of 18 from three-point range, and you had Jack Golke off the bench for Oakland go 10 of 15 from three-point range for 31 big points. That was very, very embarrassing and sad for IUPUI, but your worst cover team out there in all of college basketball, that would actually be Pacific, and yay, verily, for them being able to get a cover against Gonzaga. They were 30-point underdogs. They lose by a count of 102-76. Some actual offense being played by Pacific. They go 21 of 23 at the free throw line, but very good performance here from Gonzaga. Them not covering the spread should not lead to you downgrading them at all. Graham Ike was able to supply 21 points. Ryan Emmart, double-double, 18 points, 10 assists. So another nice showing out of Gonzaga. And Old Dominion, man, it has been a whole lot of awful for this team thus far this season. They are 6-19-1 against the spread, and on Saturday, they got it taken to them once again as they fall and they do not cover as they lose by a count of 68-65 at home against Georgia State. This game turned out to be a big giant slog. Georgia State was about a 1.5 or so point favorite, and they really took control of this game throughout Old Dominion. They were able to make a surge. They were up late in the second half by a count of 65-61, and then for the final 4:55, they scored as many points as Greg Peterson, going 4 of 22 from three-point range. So even more sadness out there, and if you're looking for some happiness, how about the way that Troy has been able to cover numbers? This Troy team deserves their kudos. They are now 17-6-1 against the spread. They get the win. They get the cover against Louisiana Monroe by a count of 85-57. Louisiana Monroe goes just 2 of 7 from three-point range and 15 of 27 at the free throw line, while Troy, they shoot 13 of 32 from distance. Christian Eugene was able to supply the team with 21 points. Troy wins the turnover battle 16-11. Actually lose the rebound battle by 10, but Louisiana Monroe not able to do anything with it because every single time they got to the free throw line, well, they were not able to do anything with it. And then CSUN has been one of your better cover teams in all of college basketball. It's been a little bit touch and go for them recently, though, and they do lose to Long Beach State by a count of 87-73. For Long Beach State, they go 9 of 26 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for CSUN, they go just 7 of 26 from three-point range. You were able to get 10 rebounds in this one out of Mohamed Fofana, but for Long Beach State, they're able to do a solid job being able to win that battle on the glass by a count of 40-37, and for CSUN losing the turnover battle 16-11. That turned out to be a little bit of doomsday for them and Arizona. It is doomsday when you have to face them at home. Arizona, they just absolutely take it to Arizona State. 105-60 for Arizona. They were able to go in this game 8 of 20 from three-point range, while Arizona State was 6 of 24 from the outside. Arizona wins the rebound battle 46-28. They win the turnover battle 12-5, and Umar Ballo give you double-double, 14 points, 11 rebounds, and a name we haven't said a whole heck of a lot of this year because Arizona has so many guys that it's not even funny. Jaden Bradley, the transfer from Alabama, has been averaging just 5.5 points per contest off the bench. 21 big ones for Arizona, if you want to say out there in the Pac-12. Talk about a absolute upchucking from USC. They lose in double overtime by a count of 92-89 against Colorado. USC had this game signed, sealed, and delivered. USC was up in this game by a count of 65-49 with 9 minutes and 2 seconds remaining, and then they toilet bowled it. For Colorado, KJ Simpson is able to come to the rescue for 30 points. So Boogie Ellis on the flip side was able to provide USC with 30 points as well. But for both teams, they go either 9 or 20 or 9 of 21 from three-point range. And for Colorado, they win this game despite losing the turnover battle 21-9 because USC, a team that typically is solid down low, they lose the rebound battle 47-22. My goodness, talk about a gutless effort. Oregon, they had to gut this one out, and Oregon State, they were able to get a nice cover at home, but Oregon, they get the job done by a count of 60-58 for Oregon State. They lose this game because they go just 2 of 18 from three-point range. Oregon somehow, someway was even worse. The Ducks win this game, going 2 of 19 from three-point range, and the reason why they won the game, they won the rebound battle by a count of 40-30. So found that to be a little bit hilarious. If you're looking at your best away team against the spread this far this season, that's Niagara. We're actually going to be seeing them in action on Sunday, so we shall see if they're able to improve upon the fact that they are now 11-1 against the spread. But how about this team being able to light it up against the spread away from home? It's Valparaiso. Valparaiso falls by a count of 82-74 against Missouri State, but they were catching 12.5 points. All of a sudden, they're 10-2 against the spread in their road game. So that's been a little bit of a moneymaker for you. And there's one team that has yet to fail to cover at home thus far this season. That would actually be Lamar. Lamar is 8-0-1 against the spread when they've been at home thus far this season, and for our good friends Lamar, they were on the road in this case, so this doesn't improve that record, but absolutely lambaste a New Orleans team that has played more than 2/3 of their games to the over thus far this season. 94-72. It has been a work of art what we've been seeing from this Lamar offense. 11-23 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for New Orleans, they did get back their top scorer in Jordan Johnson. He had not played in the previous game, supplied the team with 19 points, but didn't make too much of a difference, as that was a relatively rough one for them. Your next best cover team at home is Minnesota at 15-1. They've just been an absolute juggernaut there, and Iowa State with what they were able to do on Saturday. They moved to 13-2 against the spread at home. Alabama's 11-2 against the spread at home as well, but Morehead State, they have been another team that has been able to cash you a lot of bets when they've been at home thus far this season. They were on the road and they lose to UT Martin by a count of 88-82. So you really do want to be taking a look at some of the home and road splits with regards to some of these teams. But how about what you've also been able to get out of this bunch? As UC San Diego, the Tritons, have been a bit of a flamethrower at home thus far this season. They are 9-2 against the spread when they are at home. Now this one was not a cover. 76-69 they win, but they do not cover against Cal State Fullerton. But their team has been pretty rock solid all season long. For UC San Diego, they go 8-24 from three-point range, and the reason why Fullerton was able to snap a little bit of a nice cover run for San Diego at home, DJ Bruton was able to chip in their 30 points, 8 rebounds, and went 14 of 24 from the floor to be able to rescue that game for them. But how about Nebraska? They're now also 13-4 against the spread at home, and they absolutely laid it on Penn State. 68-49. Penn State could not get anything going whatsoever. Zach Hicks was able to give Penn State 13 points, and for Penn State, they go 5 of 23 from 3 and 8 of 16 at the free throw line, and Nebraska wins this game despite going 4 of 21 from 3, and Casey Shomanaga, he went 3 of 8 from 3, which means everyone else went 1 of 13 from distance, and yet Nebraska is able to win that game very comfortably. And if you're taking a look at the trends that we are seeing right now in college basketball, it has been very much an overwhelming season thus far this year. 51.2% of games have gone over the total, 2,231 overs to 2,124 unders, and home underdogs just continue to take it on the chin. Home underdogs hitting at just 48.8%. 587, 616, and 20 against the spread. Meanwhile, if you take a look at the last 7 days in college basketball, home underdogs, 41, 60, and 2 against the spread. I can't remember this bad of a run for home underdogs. It has been rough. Meanwhile, overs, they've actually had a little bit of a tough time with it recently themselves. Overs sitting at just 49.2% over the last 7 days, 153 overs to 158 under. So that's what we're seeing right now in college basketball, and that's what we all got on Saturday. Now let's take a look at what we're going to be getting on Sunday, the American Conference. Team said Rocco Miller is a little bit bullish and bearish on, and his thoughts from the selection committee's top 16. We're going to be chatting about that next right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peters, and now a part of the Houston Family Podcast. Back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and it is always great to be joined by this man, as Rocco Miller. He does an absolutely tremendous job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know he has been doing an absolutely amazing job of just taking a look at things in terms of all 362 teams. He has been scouring all across the country, trying to see as many of these teams as humanly possible in person, and he's been doing a tremendous job of it. I know that he is really getting heated up with regards to his bracketology, as it is starting to be that time of year, as we're about 4 weeks away from Selection Sunday. You saw the very early top 4 seeds from the selection committee come out over the weekend as well. So that's when you know that it is getting real. And to be able to follow Rocco on Twitter/X, that is at his first and last name, Rocco Miller, and then the number 8 all together. And Rocco, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Always appreciate the kind words. How have you been?
I've been very good, and Rocco, I know this is that time of year that you become a very, very busy man, but I know that it's one of your favorite times of year as well. And before we dive in on some of these individual teams, as a bracketologist, how much do you make out of the top 4 seeds coming out from the selection committee, and how much does that influence your bracketology models moving forward?
Yeah, so I thought for the most part, at least just the seeds and what number was next to their name, whether it was a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Not too many surprises. I would say the one big surprise was San Diego State being revealed as a 4 seed. I had them as a 5 seed and actually a couple spots away from even sniffing the 4 seed. So that tells us, I think, a little bit about how the committee is voting. I think a couple of the other smaller surprises were they had both Alabama and Baylor above Iowa State. Iowa State, you could argue, has a couple good road wins, I believe TCU and Texas, but they also have just dynamite metrics. And I'm, in a way, glad that they downgraded Iowa State to a degree, because Iowa State didn't do very well in the non-conference. In fact, they had a really poor non-conference. And it shows that they're actually looking at these teams really closely, at least they did for this particular exercise. That was my main takeaway, was the San Diego State getting in, Clemson not being a part of it. Those were the main takeaways. And I also thought it was interesting. They typically have a rule around regional balance, where if you add up all the seeds in one region, 1 through 4, but on the seed list. So like the Midwest had San Diego State, who was 14, Baylor, who was 10, Tennessee, who was 6, and I believe Purdue, who was 1. That added up to be a 31 altogether. We had the West, which was Arizona, Kansas, Duke, and I believe Auburn, that added up to a 37. So the old rule was you can't go more than 5 in any given region difference to create more of a balance, the strength of the region. But they've told me today, and it was very public on Twitter, David Warlock, who runs the NCAA tournament, said the committee reserves the right, if they see fit, to go outside those boundaries. So I thought that was very fascinating. The other thing was North Carolina showed up as the best 2 seed. I think a lot of us agreed after the Syracuse loss on Tuesday, they would still be a 2 seed, but would be one of the lower ones. And we were able to confirm later on that they did take the Syracuse loss into account as part of that evaluation. So North Carolina has going for them is a very strong road record, especially true road record. You could say the same thing when you look at San Diego State compared to some of the others around them, even Clemson. So that's kind of the theme I took away as an early indicator of how this committee is looking at teams.
Yep, and I do think that it is going to be very fascinating to see what happens there. And you talk about just regional integrity as well. That is always something to be very mindful of when it comes to this as well. As joining me on the show, we do have Rocco Miller. He does great work over at Bracketeer.org, and he is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rocco, when it comes to just taking a look at these teams individually in terms of just your personal opinion, because when it comes to your bracketology, you do need to stick to what the committee is putting out there, what the committee is evaluating. So I do think that that is an important moniker, because you're doing it a little bit less based on, oh, yeah, I think that this is the best team in all of college basketball, which is why I have them as a 1 seed. You're doing that because you're looking at more of the committee's metrics. But that said, who are a few teams that you just take a look at right now and you think they're playing some really good basketball and they could be a little bit more dangerous than where you'd currently have them on your current bracketology seed line?
Yeah, I mean, a couple that are really popping right now. Washington State out of the Pac-12 just got done listening to a little bit of their win on a Saturday night against Stanford. They won again by double digits, but they haven't lost in a long time. Feels like 3-4 weeks now. And they're doing it behind a freshman point guard, Miles Rice, who's tremendous. I don't know how far they can go, but if you look at some of the models, like Torvik in the last basically month has them as a top 11 team, that kind of pops for me. I don't know how high Florida can go, but right now, like that same model has Florida as the 6th best team in the country. Another really good win. They won on the road at Georgia. One of the things Florida hasn't been able to prove this year is consistent road winning. So at least they now have a Kentucky road win and a Georgia road win. So those two kind of stand out just because they've been playing some really good basketball at least the last few weeks. And I would say more of like a sleeper type of team that, gets slept on because they play in smaller leagues. I just love the athleticism and at least the starting 5 at both McNeese and Grand Canyon. I think they actually have the goods not only to win a first-round game, but maybe even the first 2 games, because most of the time you have a nice story, whether it be a Colgate or a Morehead State or somebody, but they get to that first-round game and they're completely overwhelmed by a Power 5 athletic team. I don't really necessarily care too much about who McNeese or Grand Canyon would be matched up with, because they have Power 5 level starting lineups. And I just think at this time of year, we get so caught up in the bubble and the top 4 seeds and all this stuff that these guys just start flying under the radar, but they're going to be right there ready to roll when the tournament starts.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that there's a lot of good mid-majors out there this season. Certainly Indiana State, despite the fact that they did take a loss a few days ago, they're a team that's going to be oh so dangerous. I believe that you had mentioned Grand Canyon there. That's a team that I'm really taking a liking to, and there's going to be a lot of great action when it comes to those teams that are going to be able to make it into March. And hey, perhaps 1 or 2 of them are going to be able to get an at-large bid. As joining me on the show, we do have Rocco Miller. He does great work over at Bracketeer.org and is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rocco, I know that you've taken quite a bit of a look at the American Conference this year, which I do find to be one of the more interesting conferences. And as a matter of fact, for Sunday, you're going to be able to take in this one with Florida Atlantic. They're going to be on the road facing up against South Florida. I will be talking about this game a little bit more from a betting perspective later, but right now we're fighting Florida Atlantic as a 3.5-point favorite. And do want to get your thoughts overall on this Florida Atlantic team, because I do think that there's a lot of people that have been a little bit surprised that Florida Atlantic hasn't been necessarily as dominant as they have been this year, because Florida Atlantic has really been, for lack of a better term, a get the job done sort of team in conference. They haven't lost a lot of games. They've been able to get a lot of wins, but it hasn't been as convincing as a lot of people might think. And how do you evaluate this matchup against a South Florida team that very silently has been playing some of the best defense outside the Power 6 and all of college basketball?
I'm really intrigued by it. Can't wait, actually. I've been in Florida for the last week, so I got to see the Gators on Tuesday. I saw the Owls on Thursday against Temple, against the other Owls, and then Florida State Duke. So just in terms of having so much on the line, really exciting. I know the South Florida community, a couple of them already reached out to me on Twitter, excited, that we're coming down. So the atmosphere is going to be insane. You could really tell, and it's something I kind of had a gut feeling on as well. Giancarlo Rosado being out for the last 3 or 4 weeks has really, really hurt the flexibility Dusty May has with his front line. There's sometimes where Vlad Golden will start a game with 2 straight fouls really early, and then they got to pull him out. Nothing against Trey Carroll. He brings tons of energy, and Lorient is a good project for the future. But when they have both Golden and Rosado healthy, and Rosado's not 100% yet, he only played 8 minutes in the Temple game, it just gives them such a diverse ability to match up with different front lines. And it really neutralizes a lot of different opponents, as you saw in last year's amazing run. So now that Rosado is going to start to get healthy, knock on wood that nothing goes wrong with his recovery. Of course, they're going to just give him a little bit more minutes each game. We'll see how many minutes he plays against South Florida. I think that's going to help everybody else, because when they have a bigger front line, of course, that opens up more for the wing, opens up more for the guards. The other big story at Florida Atlantic has been Elijah Martin. There's some nights where he just can't make a shot. I don't know where that came from. He was so consistent last year. But in the losses to Bryant and the loss to Florida Gulf Coast, he shot really poorly. But what I've seen the last couple of weeks and what I saw in person on Thursday, he looks like he's turning the corner. He's coming back to the Elijah Martin that we know and love. And of course, John L. Davis, the reason why the record is so good, the reason why they're still a ranked team, a projected tournament team, is every time the game gets tight, he has been putting the cape on and rescuing them. He's got something crazy like 5 or 6 game winners already this year. So he's had to play the hero role more than Dusty May probably wants him to, but that's been a huge part of the story this year. And then on the South Florida side, I'll just point out real quickly, the American Conference did something really unique this year, where they had a projected top 7 just based on a lot of different data models, and of course a projected bottom 7 for the new 14-team league. And that's what shaped the schedule. And so that was something I caught before the season. And I didn't know if it was going to be South Florida, or it ended up being Charlotte as well from the bottom, where they're really taking advantage of a much weaker conference schedule. Nothing against what they've achieved. I really like what both those teams bring to the table going forward. But I think that's allowed them to build a bunch of wins, build a lot of confidence. South Florida finds themselves still with 1 loss. And because of that unbalanced schedule, even though they're the only 2 schools in Florida in this league, it's the only time they're scheduled to play each other because of what the conference preferred to do scheduling-wise. So that just adds a little more between the Owls and the Bulls.
Yep, and I do think that is going to be a really good matchup. And it's a little bit of a shame that they're only going to be playing once as well. You do love to see those interstate rivalries, and I'm going to be very intrigued by that one. As for Florida Atlantic, they're looking to be able to duplicate what they did a season ago. And for South Florida, year number 1 under Mr. Abdul Rahim, so far so good. As those guys that came over from Wichita State, they're proving that they're able to ball at a little bit of a higher level as well. As joining me on the show, we do have Rocco Miller, does great work over at bracketeer.org, and he's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rocco, no doubt about it, you're going to be enveloped in that big game. But on Sunday, I really do think that we've got a nice slate of games in general. And there are a few other games that, whether it be from a bracketology standpoint, whether it be from a team that you're a little bit bullish/bearish on standpoint, you can pick anything on the board. What are you going to be taking a look at for Sunday other than the big game that you're going to be in attendance for?
In the Atlantic 10, a team that everybody's been sleeping on is Loyola Chicago. They've been on a big run, and they're now tied in the loss column with Richmond, who's been in first, and Dayton, of course, who's been the dominant team in the league. Even though they're going on a road trip to Rhode Island, those are the types of wins that if the Ramblers really want to continue competing for the A10 title, that's a game they got to go win. Rhode Island's pulled some upsets at home, so that will be pretty interesting. Besides that, Murray State's actually overperformed lately versus what most people would think. They don't have the wins to back it up. Did have a nice win last week. They're going to take on Drake, but I don't think it's an easy walk in the park for Drake. Drake's still a team that I have 6th outside of the field, so they're gaining some steam. Their metrics are getting better. They're a lot more attractive than a lot of the Power 5 bubble teams because they have a much better record. They have a win over Nevada. Nevada right now is sneaking in as a tournament team, and so Drake is getting taken a little more seriously. They have 3 quad 1 wins. A lot of people forget that, and that's really hard to do for a Missouri Valley school. So from Drake's standpoint, they'll be tested, and I don't know if a lot of people realize how big of a test that'll be for them. And then last but not least, over in the SoCon, Chattanooga has been red hot. Trey Bonham transfers in from Florida, reunites with his old coach Dan Earl when they were at VMI together. Trey's been on fire. He had a huge game last time out with 31 points. Meanwhile, Furman's a team that has dealt with injuries all year long. We were picking them like second, third preseason. I think they're finally starting to perform as if they're perhaps the second or third best team, but they get a chance to prove that with a hot Chattanooga team visiting Greenville.
Absolutely. I do think that that's going to be a tremendous matchup, and I do have to mention one more game that we're going to be seeing as well, and that would be the SMU versus Memphis game, because there was a point in the season where we thought that Memphis was going to be this really good team, that they were the biggest competition to Florida Atlantic out there in the American, but I don't know about you, but I can't imagine a team's schedule aging much worse than Memphis's. I mean, this has aged like milk right now. The win over Arkansas, the win over Missouri. I mean, man, it has just been really, really rough for this Memphis team, to say the least. And they're going up against an SMU team that, on the national landscape, I don't think that they're getting the love that they deserve for being one of legitimately the best defenses I've seen in college basketball this season.
Yeah, I think that SMU's had about a top 25 or better. It's probably much higher than top 25 now. Defense all year long, or most of the year, since we had mature data. It's been really impressive. The unfortunate thing for the Mustangs is they haven't got that big win. They did have a nice win at Florida State earlier this year, but unfortunately that didn't turn out to be a tournament level win yet. We'll see how that plays out later. I think their top 5 opportunities, they're 0-5. They fell short against Dayton by a couple points. They had a lot of close calls. Close call with Texas A&M, if I recall. And so this is an opportunity for SMU to finally put their stamp on. Memphis isn't quite a tournament team right now, but they're really close. So for SMU, it gives them that new confidence that they've been looking for. As for Memphis, I agree. The bad is still outweighing the good for them. However, a lot of people might forget that Memphis's biggest opportunities, at least in the American, are still ahead of them. They have 2 Florida Atlantic games left. They have this SMU game, and I know they have a couple other really strong games in the middle. And so if Memphis can get hot, I know they just lost to North Texas, and a road win at SMU will be very valuable as a quad 1. I think Memphis can play themselves back in the field pretty easily if they finish hot.
And for Memphis, they just need to find a way to be able to stop the bleeding right now, because it has been a rough last few weeks for them. And I know that a lot of people are going to look at that North Texas loss and be off put by that. I would say be a little bit more off put by the fact that they went to overtime against UTSA, because that North Texas team is playing some good basketball, and a man that knows good basketball, a man that does a tremendous job taking a look at this sport. That'd be you, Rocco. It is always great to be able to get your insights on this podcast, so let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. It's always fun to be on with you. You can follow me at Rocco Miller 8 on X/Twitter. Whatever you prefer to call it these days. That's where you're going to get the most information, updates on anything interesting going on in the sport that I'm seeing. And then my website is bracketshere.org. You can find Monday and Fridays are the days to look for new brackets in general. As we get into March, which is actually not too far away now, there'll be more regular updates. Maybe not every day, but probably every other day. Just a lot of regular new information on a daily basis almost on my website. Last but not least, Field of 68. We have a show called Fielding the 68, Mondays and Fridays, 5:30 Eastern. I'm also going to be appearing on After Dark on that network as well, so make sure to check that out.
Rocco does absolutely amazing work taking a look at this great game of college basketball. Every single time he joins this podcast, he lends such good insights, and it's always a pleasure to be able to get him aboard, and I know that he's going to be enjoying the big game between the 2 Florida schools on Sunday. A big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, along with that Florida Atlantic game, we're going to be taking a look at every game on the board for Sunday. Picks and analysis on every Sunday the game coming up next as we hit some bank shots. Your lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by Rocco Miller. He does such good work over at Bracketeer.org, looking at this great game of college basketball that we all know and love. No stone left unturned by him. He does a great job scouring all across the country, looking at so many different teams, being able to dissect so many different rosters every single time he joins this podcast. He lends such good insights, and it's always a pleasure to get him aboard. Big thanks to Rocco for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_81, and we're going to be going in the Las Vegas rotation order. We have no games on the extra games board, so this is going to be pretty much straight up in time order. That keeps things very clean, very easy, and not convoluted, which we do like on this podcast. So how about if we get things started with 821-822 on the card? It is Loyola Chicago hitting the road face-off against Rhode Island, and Rhode Island is a underdog at home of 3.5 to 4 points. So on this game, in between 147.5 to 148. I did set my line at 5.5 with Loyola Chicago. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Now, Loyola Chicago is a defense that's not quite the same on the road as they are at home, but this team has really been locking down. You saw them a few nights ago against St. Joe's, a DK Network write-up pick that we were able to hit, held them to below 65 points in that one. This team is in the top 40 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I do think that they're going to do a nice job taking it to a Rhode Island team that they have been quite a bit better at home at being able to take care of the ball, and once again with Loyola Chicago, they are giving up about 19 points more per 100 possessions at a roadside shoot score venue rather than at home. But when it comes to Rhode Island, not like this team does an amazing job of just being able to shoot. They shoot about 36.5% from three, 64% at the free throw line with about 12.5 turnovers per contest. They've been able to get a nice boost ever since David Green has been in the fold, giving the team 15 points, 5 rebounds per game. And for Loyola Chicago, what is the forte of this team is not allowing you to get second chances. This Rhode Island team is a top 25 team with regards to rebound rate, with David Fuchs being able to give about 6.5 rebounds per game. They're a team that, even though they only have Fuchs as your lone guy that gives you a north of about 5 rebounds per game, they do a relatively good job rebounding as a collective. Lewis Coatwright, Zeke Montgomery combined for like 8 boards in the backcourt. Coatwright, your main facilitator, with about 3.5 assists per contest. But with this Loyola Chicago team, I do think that they're going to do a nice job exploiting a Rhode Island bunch and has been well outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. You've got Philip Olsen, you've got Desmond Watson, pair of guys that will be able to give you about 12.5 points per contest. Now, I was alluding to the fact that Rhode Island sometimes gets very loose with the ball. That happens with Loyola Chicago as well. Loyola Chicago outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. That's been a little bit costly for them throughout the season, but with the way that Rhode Island, just in general, has been well outside the top 200 in regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, but still plays very slowly. They're a team that is well outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game as well. I do think that that's going to lead to a little bit more of a slog. Rhode Island, they allow opponents to shoot about 35% from three-point range at home, and having Braden Norris in the backcourt, being able to supply about 4.5 assists per contest, along with Loyola Chicago being a top 50 team in all of college basketball in percentage of opponents' missed shots that do not result in an offensive rebound. I do think that that keeps things relatively tame in this spot. I did set my total 143.5, looking at the under with Loyola Chicago. Want to lay up to 5 with them, set them as a 5.5 point favorite. 823, 824 on the betting board. Wichita State is road face-off against Charlotte. Charlotte is a favorite of 7 to 7.5 points. Totals between 135.5 and 136.5. I did set my total 134.5. I'm looking at the under. Charlotte is outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and they've been able to do a solid job on defense. I'll stop short of saying amazing or anything like that, but now they get to go up against a Wichita State team that has just not been able to knock down outside shots all season long, shooting 31.5% from 3. Wichita State is a team that hovers right around 100th in terms of total possessions per game. They do turn it over about 12.7 times per contest, and for this Wichita State unit, they've been okay at being able to guard the arc. Not amazing, not terrible, 142nd in all of college basketball with this regard, going up against a Charlotte team that is Igor Milicic, who should be able to do a nice job down low, providing about 13 points, 8 boards, shoots in the high 30s from three-point range for a Charlotte defense that has been just incredible and not allowing you to get those open shots. 29th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Now, Wichita State is a top 100 team in terms of rebound rate with a trio of guys, Quincy Ballard, Kenny Poto, Dallin Reginald, all giving you 6+ rebounds per contest. So I do think that they're going to have some success in the post, especially with Ballard being able to give you 2.2 blocks per contest, and then you've got Kobe Rogers, who's been able to supply you with about 15.5 points per game, but I just simply don't think that Wichita State is able to do their part with this total, and I do think that Charlotte is going to be getting more of their slow, grimy pace. Wichita State, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, has left quite a bit of something to be desired this year at 248th, and they do see a drop-off of about 9.5 points per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home, but it's not like the Charlotte team has necessarily been amazing in terms of their offense as well. They've got, as I mentioned before, Milicic doing a little bit of everything, and then you've had Lucio Patterson give you about 14 points. He and Nick Graves combined for about 5.5 assists per contest, but for the Charlotte bunch, you're about 133rd in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis as well, and with this Wichita State team having given up 68 or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games, and Charlotte now haven't given up at least 70 points in 4 of their last 5, I do think that things are going to be rather snug in this spot. I think that this is going to be a slow control game in which both teams are going to have their struggles from 3-point range. Charlotte overall, they shoot about 31.8% from 3-point range. To their credit, they only turn the ball over about 9.7 times per contest, so I do think that in the end, Charlotte is going to be able to pull this one out, but I do think that's going to be a little bit tight with the way that Wichita State is able to man up on the glass. I did set my line at 6.5, so here at 7, taking the points with Wichita State, made my total 134.5 as well, so also diving under. 825, 826 on the betting board. Florida Atlantic, it's a road face-off against South Florida. South Florida is an underdog at home of 3.5 to 4 points, total on this game, it is 147 to 147.5. I did make Florida Atlantic a favorite of 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Florida Atlantic has had a tough time covering the big spreads here in conference, but they've been getting a lot of straight-up wins, and I do feel like we're finally getting a little bit of a buy point on them just because Florida Atlantic, they have been overvalued throughout the season due to the Final Four run that they've made, but this offense has been tremendous. The offense has supplied at least 73 points in each of their last 4 games, and if you take that game against North Texas out of the fold, North Texas has just been an absolute juggernaut in terms of being able to tee teams up. And this team, they've been able to get 270 plus on the regular all season long, a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, with a guy in John L. Davis, who's one of the best pure scorers that you're going to find in all of college basketball. 18.5 points, right around about 1.7 steals, 6.5 boards on 46.7% 3-point shooting. Now, for South Florida, this team has been able to muster their way into the top 70 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they do a nice job of being able to guard the arc as well. South Florida allowing you to shoot just 30.3% from 3-point range at home, and for Florida Atlantic, it is a relative drop-off when they do hit the road in terms of their 3-point shooting defense. At home, opponents are shooting just 29.9% from 3-point range against them. This has climbed to 36% when they are away from home. For Florida Atlantic, it's going to be very key for them to get good production out of Vladislav Golden, the true 7-footer who is able to give you about 6.7 boards, block and a half per contest, because for South Florida, they are outside the top 175 with regards to rebound rate. Kashawn Pryor is the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, Florida Atlantic, even though Golden is your main guy, you've got the rebounds I was mentioning with Davis. You've been able to get good production out of Giancarlo Rosado when he's out there, as he's been in and out of the fold. He's been dealing with injury throughout the entirety of the season, but even when he's not out there, still have Elijah Martin, a guard that's able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Florida Atlantic, 52nd with regards to the rebound rate. I do think that that's going to be key. And I do think that South Florida going to be able to sink some threes. Overall, for the season, they're shooting about 36.5% from 3-point range. But if you look at things ever since early December, when they played that game against Florida State, they're shooting about 40% from 3-point range. Ever since then, Celta Miguel, Chris Youngblood combined for about 29 points. They both shoot about 41 to 42% from 3-point range. They only turn the ball over about 10.8 times per contest, as both of these teams do a nice job of taking care of the ball. Neither team really generates a lot of turnovers, so that should lead to a lot of clean possessions in this game. And I do think that South Florida, who's really been able to hold up on defense, they've given up 70 points for fear in each of the last 5 games. They're going to meet their match in this one. Got a Florida Atlantic team that has really been able to crank things up in terms of their scoring without necessarily going super duper fast. They stay in control. They're just really efficient. And I do think that there's going to be lots of shot making in this game. I do think that there's going to be late game fouling as well, which is why I did set my total 149.5. I'm looking at the over on Florida Atlantic. I did make them a 5.5 point favorite. That's a perfect strike zone for late game fouling to be able to help out with this total. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Florida Atlantic. 827, 828 on the betting board. It is Purdue, and they hit the road. They're facing off against Ohio State. The Ohio State University is a 7.5 point home underdog. Total on this game between 145.5 and 146. Going to be very interesting to watch this Ohio State team moving forward, because I believe that John Diebler is now their associate coach. You may remember him from back in the day for Ohio State. And I do think that it's going to fire up the guys a little bit. I just still think that Purdue is by far the better team in this spot, and I did give a little bit of a bump to Ohio State as compared to normal because of the interim coach. I do think that you're going to see a little bit more of a spirited effort here. You've got Jameson Battles able to shoot about 43% from three, 13.5 points per contest for an Iowa State team as a top 75 team. With regards to rebound rate, Felix Opara is able to give you about 6.5 boards, 2.5 blocks per game. It's not like Ohio State is breath of talent. You've got Roddy Gallo, you got Bruce Thornton combining for about 30 points, 7.5 assists. They really don't turn the ball over a ton. You tell that what they were trying with Chris Holtman just was not working, though, and for Iowa State, the biggest thing for the team was their defense. It had fallen off a cliff, falls at the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and in my opinion, they're just not going to have a response for Giant of the Year, Zach Edey, 23.5 points, 1.8 boards per contest. Purdue, once again, in the top 10 with regards to rebound rate, but unlike last season, Purdue, now a top 5 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Braden Smith is the thing for that. North of 7 assists, 13 points, 5.7 rebounds on 44% three-point shooting. And for this Purdue team, among players that have made at least 1 3 and are averaging at least 2.7 points per contest, all but one out of their top 7 scorers are shooting at least 42% from three-point range. And they go up against an Iowa State team that, you guess it, they're not doing the world's greatest job of being able to guard the three-pointer. For Ohio State, they're allowing opponents to shoot 35.9% from three. That is 307th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, Purdue, in a road and neutral court venue, they allow opponents to shoot about 33% from three-point range. At home, that goes down to about 30.5% from distance. Having guys that are versatile like Miles Colvin certainly helps out Purdue. Fletcher Lawyer has become a nice off-the-ball guard who's able to give you about 10.5 points per contest. You just, in my opinion, have too many weapons for Purdue. Ohio State, I do think that they're going to be able to give you a better effort than they would have otherwise, but this is still an Ohio State team that has been stuck in the mud with their offense, and defensively, they have given up 75+ in 4 of their last 5 games. This is a spot where I'm going to be willing to lay with Purdue. I did set them as an 8-point favorite. I did set my total at a 148. I do think that Ohio State is going to be able to make some shots here, but I just think that Purdue is just reaching a different level in terms of their offense. So I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Purdue. 829, 830 on the betting board. Iona, they play us to St. Peter's. St. Peter's is a underdog of 6 points. Your total on this game is 132.5. I did set my line at 6, so we're going to be waiting upon a little bit of movement here. If we can get a 6.5 or more, that'll be a buy point for me on St. Peter's. And I was seeing a 7 out there very briefly. If we can get back there, I would be willing to take a shot on St. Peter's. I would need 5.5 or less to be able to lay the number here with Iona. Iona does a really good job of being able to generate turnovers. In terms of turnovers for us, on a per-possession basis, they are a top 30 team in the country, with Joel Brown really doing a nice job, generating north of 2 steals per game. Hasn't done a lot on the scoring side. He's only giving you about 6-7 points per contest, but has done a good job of being able to keep things clean and efficient, and this is going to bode very well for them, in my opinion, against the St. Peter's team, one that does turn the ball over north of 13 times per contest, and while Iona has that strength, St. Peter's is going to have strength on the glass. This Iona bunch, while outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate, they do have Osborne Shema, their 7-footer, back in the fold after he was out towards the beginning part of the season, but hasn't necessarily given the team a ton down low. He's giving you a block, he's giving you like 3.5 rebounds per game, and certainly has affected a few shots, but his impact has not been as big as you might think. And when it comes to the St. Peter's team, while they have been dealing with a few injuries, getting back Michael Hoagie, who's been able to give you about 8 points, 6 boards per contest, that's been nice. Now, they have been missing their top scorer in Corey Washington in the last few games. Just get him back in the last game against Iona, and he looked 100%. He was able to score 29 points in that one, so that was big for St. Peter's. The St. Peter's bunch, of which he's their top 3-point shooter for them. They shoot as collective 31% from 3. He's really the only guy in the roster that gives you any sort of scoring that is shooting above 34% from 3-point range, but I do think that the turnovers, they're going to be a little bit costly, even with Latrell Reed giving you about 4 assists. He does still give you about 2.7 turnovers per contest, so I do think that Iona is going to do a nice job, be able to take the ball away, and this Iona team has been a top 175 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For Iona, you can carve them up from 3-point range. St. Peter's doesn't do a great job there, but St. Peter's not going to allow Iona to be able to get inside as well, so I do think that this is going to be a low-scoring slog, with St. Peter's being well outside the top 275 in terms of possessions per game. Did set my line at a 130 in terms of total. Looking at the under, and if we could get back to the 6.5 to 7 that I was seeing a little bit before, would be willing to take those points, with St. Peter's made them an underdog of 6, 831, 832 on the betting board. It is Drake, and they play us to Murray State. Murray State is a underdog of 9 to 9.5 points. Your total on this game, it is 139, and with Drake, I did set them as a favorite of 9.5 points. Mostly seeing 9 out there, and I'm going to be willing to lay the 9. Drake is a very balanced team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. The team really checks both of those boxes, as they are 28th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, a top 65 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and we've got one of the most prolific players that you're going to find in mid-major college basketball, Tucker DeVries. He's able to give you 20 points, 6 boards, 3+ assists per contest, going up against a Murray State unit that was just absolutely terrible with their defense to begin the season. They were not guarding a soul. They were well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it's not to say that they're like some sort of an amazing defense right now. They've climbed into the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis if you look overall for the season, but man, has it improved. And this for a Murray State team that they do like to slow down games. Murray State outside the top 240 in terms of total possessions per game, but I mean, just really big for this Murray State team that the last time they gave up 72 points in a game, you have to go back to January 2nd when they gave up 73 points. So Murray State has really been able to elevate there. They've got two nice guards in Jacoby Wood, Lonthrob Perry. They're able to combine for about 25 points per contest. Wood has been able to shoot 40% from 3-point range, but I do think that they're going to meet their match with Darnell Brody down low. This is Murray State team that has really been having their issues on the glass, who are in 34th with regards to rebound rate. You do have Nick Ellington, who's able to give you 6 rebounds per game, and by committee, your top 4 scorers for this Murray State team have all been able to supply you with at least 4 rebounds per game, but this is a Drake team that is in the top 100 with regards to their rebound rate, because along with having Darnell Brody being able to lock it down low, along to DeVries, you've got a lot of guys in the backcourt that do a nice job of just not allowing teams to be able to get clear shots, not allowing them to be close to the rim, so that does not allow for a lot of second chances. Aiden Wright has been a very good defender, but along with that, he's able to give you 14 points. He shoots 39% from 3-point range. This is also a Drake team that does a really good job of not beating themselves. Really, both of these teams have been pretty rock solid on that front. You've got a Drake team that's only turned the ball over about 9.9 times per contest. Meanwhile, on the flip side, you've got a Murray State team that's turning the ball over about 9.5 times per contest as well. These are two top 50 teams with regards to fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. So I do think that both are going to be able to do a relatively solid job of being able to take care of the ball, but I do think that the overall shot making, it is just better with this Drake team, and Drake is by far the better exterior defense as well. This is a Murray State team that while they have been able to improve with regards to their defense, they still do allow a lot of open looks from 3-point range. Murray State overall for the season in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, 248th in the country, and befuddlingly, that's about 31.4% on the road, 37.8% from 3 at home, but Drake has been very consistent in really both venues. This Drake team, they allow you overall to shoot about 32.6% from 3-point range, and that goes down to 29.8% when they are at home. So I do think that Drake going to be able to win the battle from the outside. I do think that they're going to be able to take it to Murray State. I did set my line at 9.5. I love the overall balance of Drake. I do think that they're going to be able to get to this Murray State team, and I think they do just enough to be able to get this total over. Set my total 139.5. Looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 9 with Drake. 833, 834 on the betting board. Northern Iowa is going to be playing us to Bradley. The Braves of Bradley are 2 to 2.5 point road favorites. Your total on this game going to be getting it anywhere between 140 and 141. And with Bradley, I did set them as a road favorite of 3 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Bradley got off to a little bit of a rough start to begin the season, but do like the way that they've been able to step it up. They have been able to cut down on the turnovers earlier during the season. They returned the ball over north of 12.5 times per contest, and they still overall for the season have turned the ball over a little bit north of 11.5 times per game, but it's been looking a whole heck of a lot better with Connor Hickman being able to give you 15 plus points, shooting it well from 3-point range. If you do have an issue with this Bradley team, though, it is that they are going to give you a few open looks. This Bradley team, with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, that is clocking in the neighborhood of about 34.8%. But what's interesting about Bradley, they allow you to shoot just 33.2% from 3-point range away from them. That goes to 36.2% when they are at home. And they go up against a Northern Iowa team that has been having their struggles on defense all season long. Northern Iowa, about 286th in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. I was mentioning it in the last breakdown with Murray State, but Northern Iowa is another one of those teams as well that they got off to a really rough start to begin the season with regards to their defense, and now they've been able to muster up just a little bit of better effort. They have given up 71 points for fear in their last 4 games, but last time they faced off against Bradley, they got absolutely pasted for 85 in that game. Bradley only shot 8 of 30 from 3-point range as well, and I do think that this might be a little bit of a rough matchup for a Northern Iowa team that just flat out doesn't have a lot of size down low. They do have someone that is 6'11", Jacob Hudson. He's been able to give you about 4 boards per contest, but doesn't really do a good job of asserting himself down low. You've got Titan Anderson, Nathan Izey, who both are able to combine for about 12 rebounds per contest. These are the only 2 guys on the roster that do give you north of 4 rebounds per per game. Northern Iowa clocking in right around about 187th in all of college basketball in terms of rebound rate, and having to go up against Malevy Leons, who's been able to give you about 7 boards per contest for a Bradley team that's 102nd in the country with regards to rebound rate. I do think that that's going to take it out of them just a little bit. It is a Northern Iowa team that also does have a nice go-to scorer in Bowen Bourne, who's been able to give you about 13.5 points per contest. Not really an efficient scorer there. He's shooting about 39.2% from the floor, 31.5% from three-point range. And with the way that Bradley has been able to do a much better job of just being able to execute in general on offense, I do think that it's going to be a little bit too much for Northern Iowa to be able to overcome. These are two teams that don't necessarily play super up-tempo as well. They've been pretty efficient on offense. They've been pretty solid in terms of their defense recently. So I do think that this is a total that has went a little bit too high, even though I do think that this is going to be a game that is going to be still good enough for late game fouling. As a result, I did set my total at 139. Here at a 140, 140.5. It is going to be a spot for me to dive in on the under. Also for this Northern Iowa team, they are about 145th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. So hasn't like they've been necessarily a world beater there. And with regards to this line, I did set Bradley as a 3-point favorite. And Northern Iowa, by the way, actually averaging fewer points per possession when they're at home rather than on the road. So look at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 2.5 here with Bradley. 835, 836 on the betting board. It is Belmont. They hit the road. They're facing off against Illinois. Chicago. UIC is a home underdog of 2 to 2.5 points. Still on this game is between 152.5 and 153.5. With UIC, I did set them as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on the money line. Now, what's been really strange about this UIC bunch is that they're giving up north of 7 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're on the road rather than at home. This team has actually been a really good defensive team. They're a top 125 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're a top 35 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. But for some reason, they have been worse when they've been at home rather than on the road. And I think the big key for this UIC team is having Isaiah Rivera being able to get it going. He's been able to give the team about 15 points per contest from three-point range. He's been able to pop it at a clip of about 41.7% from three-point range. And last time these two teams played on the road, UIC was able to get a little bit more of their brand of basketball, but they just couldn't execute. They lost that game 74-65 on a day where Belmont shot about 9-26 from three-point range, and that is a specialty of this Belmont team. They're in the top 40 nationally in terms of percentage of shots that do come from three-point range. They've got Cade Tyson along with Malik Dia, both of these guys staying right around 6'6", 6'7". They've been able to shoot it well from three-point range. Dia shoots about 33% from the outside with 17.5 points per contest. Tyson about 16.5 points, chips in there 5.7 rebounds per game. And despite the fact that out of your top 5 scorers, 4 of them do supply north of 4 rebounds per game for Belmont, this team is well outside the top 225 with regards to their rebound rate. Illinois Chicago is another team that's outside the top 200 with regards to their rebound rate as well. But I do think that the overall versatility of UIC is going to be able to hold up, as you got someone in Toby Okani who does it all at 6'8", gives you about 10.5 points, 7.5 boards. He only shoots about 27% from three-point range, but chips in there 2 blocks, a steal per contest. Really like what he's able to bring to the table. Philip Soboski, he's able to give you a few points. He's able to haul in there some boards as well. So I do think that UIC going to be able to do a relatively solid job down low. These are a pair of teams that play a little bit of opposite styles. UIC is looking to slow things down a little bit more. Belmont, they're playing at a top 75 pace with regards to total possessions per game. And UIC has been hurt a little bit by turnovers. They've been turning the ball over about 12.8 times per contest, but you go up against a Belmont team that's right there with them, about 12.6 turnovers per game. Belmont focuses a little bit more on steals. You've got a UIC team that focuses a little bit more on taking away the arc, and you saw UIC take control of the game early on the first time around. They just didn't necessarily have enough to be able to maintain in the second half. I do think that with this game now being in UIC, and UIC being able to do a solid job recently with their defense, they've now given up 74 points or fewer in each of their last 4 games. They do go up against a Belmont team that has been pretty warm with regards to their offense. They've been able to get past the 72-point plateau in 4 of their last 5 games, but have given up 78 plus in 3 out of their last 5. It is going to cause for an interesting circumstance, and I do think that much like the first time around, UIC gets this to be a little bit more of a defense-oriented game. I do think that that's going to bode very well for them. So I did set UIC as a favorite of 2 points. I'm looking at them on the money line. Semi-total 146, also looking under. 837, 838 on the betting board. Temple, we give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. They play OC UT San Antonio. meet for the Road Runners, who find themselves as underdogs of 5 to 5.5 points. So on this game is 156. Semi-line at 5. Now that we're getting a 5.5 out there with UTSA, I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now UTSA has been a train wreck in terms of their defense. They are well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Open opportunities to be had against this bunch. The problem is for Temple, other than Micah Piccarelli, who's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, you really don't have anyone to take advantage of this, shall we say, lackluster defense. As for Temple, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're 272nd in all of college basketball. They bring in Adam Fisher, who was able to do a nice job of being able to elevate the Penn State team, but they were pretty slow, pretty controlled, and they had good shooters. Well, the team is playing relatively slowly. They're playing in control because they only turn the ball over about 10.5 to 11 times per contest. They don't get out of sorts with it, with their main point guard in Heisier Miller give you 15 points, 4 assists, so they're able to be efficient there, but they just don't have shot makers. They're shooting 38.5% from the floor, 29.7% from three-point range, and then you layer that with the fact that despite the fact that they've got pretty much 4 separate guys on the roster, though, Jaleel White has been in and out of the fold all season long, and he counts as one of them, giving you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. They're still well outside the top 200 with regards to the rebound rate, as well as they do allow a lot of second and third chances, and this is a UTSA team that is in the top 225 with regards to their rebound rate. Jordan Ivy Curry has been able to do a tremendous job since becoming eligible for this bunch, give you 16.5 points, 3.5 assists, shoots 36.5% from three-point range, and he's in tandem with the 5 assists north of 12 points per contest that you get out of Christian Tucker, who's been able to shoot about 34% from three-point range himself. And with Temple, while the team is not making a lot of threes, they shoot 29.7% from three-point range. They'll give you a lot of wide open looks at home. At home, they are allowing opponents to shoot 37.4% from three-point range. Now, to the credit of Temple, they have been able to get a little bit more scoring going. So even though Carlton Lindgard, I do think is going to be able to do a solid job down low for UTSA, giving you a double-figure amount of points, blocking half for contests. I do think that Temple is going to be able to find ways to be able to get a few buckets, and UTSA, they themselves well outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. As for Temple, they've gotten to at least 70 points in 4 out of their last 5 games. That said, they have been land-based on defense as well, giving up at least 80 in 3 out of their last 4. You've got a UTSA team that's just getting absolutely pasted. Last time they gave up fewer than 79 points in a game. You have to go all the way back to January 13th, but both of these teams have had their recent numbers warped a little bit by overtime. Temple had to play a pair of overtime games against East Carolina, along with Tulane. They played a little bit of better defense if you take that out of the fold. And for UTSA, well, this has been a really, really bad team defensively. They went to overtime with Memphis. They went to overtime with Rice. They went to overtime with Florida Atlantic. So we've been seeing a lot of overtime out there in the American, really bumping up these numbers. And I do think that we are going to see things slow down a little bit more. And I do think that for Temple, they're going to be able to iron out their home and road defensive splits because they're allowing opponents to shoot, as I mentioned before, north of 37% from three-point range at home. That actually drops right around about 31.5% in a road/neutral court venue. So I do find that to be a little bit of intrigue. I do think that Temple is able to give you a relatively okay effort there, and I do think that both of these teams just flat out missed quite a few shots in this one, which is why I did my total at a 151. I'm going to be looking at the under, and at anything north of 5, I'm going to be willing to take the points with the UTSA. I think that they do a solid job down low in this affair. 839, 840 on the bank board. East Carolina plays close to Tulane. Tulane is a 1 to 1.5 point underdog. Your total on this game, it is 150. With East Carolina, I did set them as a favorite of 2 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 to 1.5. Tulane is a top 25 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game, going up against an East Carolina team that's more around 300. So you got a little bit of a battle of the tortoise and the hare, and for East Carolina, their biggest advantage is going to be down low. They go up against a Tulane bunch as outside of the top 325 with regards to rebound rate, while East Carolina is not laying the world on fire on the glass. They're about 188th. You've been able to have Brandon Johnson do a solid job hauling in their 8.5 rebounds, 13 points per contest. He shoots in the high 30s from three-point range, and East Carolina, each of their top 3 scores, you're able to throw in there RJ Felton, Ezra Uzar. They've all been able to give you at least 4.8 boards per contest. Felton and Johnson combined for about 3.5 steals per game, and then Uzar shoots about 38.5% from three-point range. As a whole, East Carolina is shooting just 30.3% from three-point range. They go up against a Tulane team that they do a much better job of guarding the perimeter than they do down low, and for East Carolina, it has been a defense that has been a little bit, shall we say, maligned based on what we saw towards the beginning part of the season, but in conference, they've really been able to buckle down, do a solid job job there, and they've been able to guard the arc all season long. 33rd in the country with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they do have to go up against a Tulane team that, while they don't necessarily have a ton of depth, they do have some good top-flight scoring, as got Kevin Cross, who's been able to give you 16-plus points, hauls in there about 7 boards. He's been able to do a nice job with his overall versatility, and this is a Tulane team that they do just rip the ball away from you. This Tulane bunch has, out of their top 5 scorers, 4 of them giving you at least a steal and a half per contest, including a 40% three-point shooter in Kobe King, who's been able to supply you with about 12 points per contest. Zion James, he hauls in there 1.7 steals, 14 points, 5 boards. He shoots 39.5% from three-point range. All in all, it is a Tulane team that just has been able to get points at will. They have scored at least 78 points each of their last 4 games. Now, for this Tulane defense, they have been getting absolutely pasted all season long. They have given up at least 75 points in each out of their last 8 games. You've got an East Carolina team, on the other hand, that has given up 73 or fewer in each out of their last 5 games. So it is a circumstance that something's got to give, and I do think that this is going to be a game that's going to be sung it up for late game felling. I do think that things are going to be a little bit more up and down, and because I do think that East Carolina is going to be able to take care of the ball, but it'll be Pettiford giving you north of 3 assists, so less than a turnover and a half per contest, that East Carolina going to be able to find a way to be able to get it done and to be able to get more points up on the board than they're used to. I did set this total at a 152. I'm looking at the over, and with East Carolina, made them a 2-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 to 1.5. 841, 842 on the betting board. Ryder hits a road face off against Manhattan. Manhattan does find themselves as an underdog at home of 2.5 points. Dawn's game is 145. I did set Manhattan as an underdog of 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Ryder. This Manhattan team just has not been able to get right all season long. They're outside the top 275 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 275 with regards to rebound rate. They're giving it up from 3-point range, and while this Ryder team still hasn't been prolific from the outside for the season at 32.8%, if you look at this team since conference play really began, and that's excluding like the random 1 or 2 conference games that you saw in November, they've been shooting in the high 30s from 3-point range. And Mervyn James is going to be by far the best player out there on the floor. 18.5 points, 6.5 boards. He gives you a block while shooting 40% from 3-point range. And TJ Weeks has gotten his act together as well. He's shooting 36.5% from the outside. He's been able to supply the team with a little bit over 10 points per contest as well. You've got, out of your top 4 scorers, 3 of them giving you at least 6.5 rebounds per game. And when it comes to Manhattan, you really have one guy that's been able to do a solid job on the glass. That'd be Sidou Traore, who's been able to give you double figures. He's shipping in there about 8.5 rebounds per game. But Ryder should be able to control that battle down low. Ryder 92nd in the country with regards to rebound rate with Tariq Ingram. They transfer from Wake Forest, being able to also give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. And they're just looking for answers in the backcourt. This Manhattan bunch has been giving the ball away with north of 14 turnovers per contest. Now, if they're able to get clean looks, Ryder is a team that you're able to exploit from the outside. Ryder allowing opponents to shoot 34.7% from 3-point range when they're away from home. And Shaquille Bender, he's been able to shoot about 33% from the outside. He gives you 13 points. He's been able to chip in there a little bit over his steal per contest. And I do like what Jaden Winston has brought to the table. 5 assists, 2.3 steals. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, but he's been able to give you about 9 points per contest. But the scoring has been very, very, shall we say, sporadic with regards to guys like a Briggs McClain, who comes over from Hartford, follows his coach in Mr. John Gallagher over from Hartford. Perry Cohn has only been able to give you about 5 points per contest. Meanwhile, for Ryder, they sort of know who they are. Alan Boom Boom Powell has been able to give you 10 points per contest for Ryder. It's been rough for them on defense. They have given up 77 plus points in 3 of their last 4 games, but this Manhattan team just has not been able to get out of neutral in terms of their offense as well. It's a squad that in regulation, because their game against Niagara, that went to overtime when they were playing in regulation. That was a 73-73 game. So in regulation, they have scored 73 or fewer in 6 out of their last 7 games. And the last time these two teams played, Ryder was able to hold Manhattan to just 58 points. I do think the Ryder going to be able to do a solid job once again. I do think that the shooting is going to be a little bit more warm than what we saw the first time around. And this has been a Manhattan team that's just been bleeding points all season long. So I did set my total at a 146.5 with Ryder starting to get things going from 3-point range. I'm going to be looking at the over. And with Ryder, did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 2.5 with them. 843, 844 on the betting board. It is Fairfield, and they play us Mount St. Mary's. The Mount is a 4.5 to a 5-point road underdog. Your total on this game is 146.5. I did set Fairfield as a favorite of 6 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Fairfield. I've been highly impressed by the way that this team has been able to elevate their tempo and yet be more efficient on both the offensive and defensive end. They're in the top 165 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and they found a do-it-all player in Jasper Floyd. Floyd has supplied the team with 9.8 points, 6 boards, 4.5 assists, 2.5 steals per contest, and this Fairfield team, they're shooting about 36.7% from three-point range. They go up against a Mount St. Mary's team that has been able to clean up some of the turnovers, but still, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they are well outside the top 275 in all of college basketball in that regard, and Mount St. Mary's has really cranked up their tempo. This is traditionally a team that's outside the top 280 in terms of total possessions per game. They're now inside the top 130 this season, and for the Mount, they do suffer quite a bit of a drop-off with their offense away from home. They're averaging about 11.9 points fewer per 100 possessions at a roadside-shoot-score venue rather than at home, and they go up against a Fairfield team that as a whole, they've been able to shoot about 36.7% from three-point range, and for Fairfield, interestingly, they're shooting about 33% from three-point range at home. That does balloon to about 39% in a roadside shoot-to-court environment, which honestly is not the world's worst thing, because the one thing that Mount St. Mary's has been able to do a solid job of is being able to hold up with regards to perimeter defense, but that's more so at home. Mount St. Mary's allows you to shoot just 30.1% from three-point range at home. That does balloon to about 36.7% from three-point range in a roadside shoot-to-court venue, and despite the fact that Mount St. Mary's is a top 100 team with regards to rebound rate, Fairfield, they're outside the top 200, though they've been able to get Louis Bleachmore going a little bit more for about 5 boards, 8 points per contest. They don't have a single guy, Mount St. Mary's does, that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. You've been able to get 4.8 rebounds per game out of the likes of Joey Cordelia, Dolo Edbale, but nobody gives you north of 5 boards per contest. Dakota LeFew shipped in there 18 points, 4 assists, and he's cleaning up those turnovers down to fewer than 3 per contest. But for Mount St. Mary's, overall, they do shoot about 33.3% from three-point range. This is a Fairfield defense that sometimes they can be at a little bit from the outside, especially at home. They do allow opponents to shoot 33.3% from three-point range, but I do think that Fairfield going to be able to do enough to get it done in this spot. I do think that this is going to be a rather moderate tempo game. I did set my total at 146. Both of these teams at their core seasons ago were much more slow teams, so I do think that the turnovers that you get out of Mount St. Mary's, coupled with the fact that Fairfield is honestly shot a little bit less at home rather than on the road, is going to be able to allow you to keep this total under. But that said, with Fairfield, made them a 6-point favorite despite their disadvantage on the glass. I'm going to be looking at Fairfield in the spot and going to be diving in on the under. 845, 846 on the betting board. Siena plays us Canisius. Canisius is a road favorite of 2.5 points. Total on this game, you're going to be getting it at a 138.5, and with Canisius, I made them a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Siena. It's been just all sorts of awful for this bunch. You've got a pair of guys in John Drew Gordon and Michael Ely who have been in and out all season long. Both of these guys have missed at least 10 games this season, and they're the top 2 scorers for the team. They combine for just under 34 points per contest. Between the two of them, you get about 14 rebounds, but both shoot less than 30% from 3. For a Siena bunch that they're shooting 27.2% from 3. That's a bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball. They're in the bottom 5 nationally in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They shoot 64% at the free throw line. One thing that this team does, they're a top 225 team with regards to their rebound rate. Giovanni Amaruju, coupled with Michael Ivabaro, they've been able to combine for about 12 rebounds per game, and hopefully I got those names correct, but I mean, past that, you just have not been able to have a lot going for this team, and Ivabaro, he's been out since the beginning of the month of February, so that helps out a Canisius team that is going to have the best pure rebounder in this game. Frank Mitchell is a top 10 player nationally with regards to 11.7 rebounds per game, chips in there 13 points per contest, and then you've got Siem Ijandal along with Trey Dinkins, combined shoot about 37.5% from three-point range. These two guys, they've been able to give you about 28.5 points per game, and for Canisius, the defense has been all over the place. They're outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they've been halfway decent at being able to guard the three-point line. That is a little bit more at home. On the road, they do allow opponents to shoot darn near 37% from 3. That compares to about 27.5% from three-point range at home, but for Siena, who's going to be able to take advantage of that? I really don't think that they're going to have too much of that. You've got Zach Tekin, who's been able to give you about 4 assists per contest, but he also gives the ball away with a bunch of turnovers as well. This Siena bunch, they're 275th in the country with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage as well, and for Canisius, I do think that they're going to be able to do a solid job of playing relatively even up on the glass, even if you do have a little bit of advantage. For Siena, that's pretty much the only place where you've got an advantage. And for Canisius, they themselves are about 110th in the country with regards to their overall rebound rate. It's been a Canisius bunch that has been stuck in the mud with their offense. 71 points or fewer scored in 11 out of their last 14 games, but we got a Siena team that they themselves have just really been up against it with their offense. 61 points or fewer scored in 4 out of their last 5 games. I do think the Canisius bottles them up and is able to get the job done in a game that I do do think it's going to feature a little bit more scoring than what we've seen out of both of these teams recently. I did set my total at a 138.5. Here at a 138, I'd be willing to go over both of these teams. They really think of both aspects of basketball, and Canisius is a top 130 team with regards to total possessions per game, and with Ely along Drew Gordon, both guys who have been just in and out all season long being back, I do think that elevates Siena's scoring just a little bit, so looking at the over, but with Canisius, one to lay up to 4 with them. 847, 848 on the betting board. Quinnipiac plays host to Niagara. Niagara is a underdog of 7 points. Your total on this game, it is 150 to 150.5. I did set Quinnipiac as a 7-point favorite. The opener on this game was 6.5. If we could get back to that 6.5 opener, I am going to be willing to lay this number for Quinnipiac. They've really been checking a lot of boxes this season. They're a top 80 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They've been able to do a nice job of being able to rebound by committee, as they're about 81st in the country with regards to their rebound rate, going up against a Niagara team that has slid outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But the one thing that's been able to keep Niagara very lively all season long is that this team can just flat out put the ball in the basket. They're only turned the ball over about 11 times per contest in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, a top 125 team in all of college basketball. Niagara's three-point shooting, to my surprise, has really traveled. Niagara, overall, in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, is 51st in all of college basketball at 36.5%. That actually jumps to 40.2% when they are away from home. For Niagara, your main scorer has been Ahmad Henderson. He's been able to supply the team with 13 points per contest, and he's actually one of the lesser guys on this roster in terms of three-point shooting percentages. Out of your top 6 scorers that have made at least 1 3 this season, so that takes out their 7-footer in Harlan Obiana, who's been able to give you 10 points, 8 boards per contest. He is the only one of them that shoots below 37.9% from distance. You've got a flip side of Quinnipiac that does have really good balanced scoring, though you do have that primary scorer as well, Matt Blonich, who's been able to give you 18.5 points, shoots 36.5% from three-point range, and each of the top 5 scorers for Quinnipiac do shoot at least 35.5% from three-point range, and got really good balanced rebounding with Amari Tice along with Paulo Otinho, both being able to give you 7 boards per contest. They both give you over a block per game. They combine for about 3 steals per contest. This team is really doing a nice job checking a lot of boxes, and they've got by far the better facilitator in this game, Savion Lewis, who's been able to give you a steal and a half along with 7.4 assists per game. Doesn't really get super active with his scoring, 8.5 points per game, but with 7.4 assists per game, that is a top 3 mark in all of college basketball with Quinnipiac. Maybe not having that 7-footer, but having balanced rebounding, I do think that that's going to play very well for them in a spot where they have scored at least 77 points in each of their last 4 games. They're going up against a Niagara team that does feel like they're getting back to their defensive roots. This bunch, they have now given up 65 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games. A little bit of that is a matter of circumstance and a matter of just general scheduling, but that said, I do think that with this Quinnipiac team, they're going to be able to do a nice job D'ing up against this Niagara team, and I do think that Niagara sees a little bit of regression from their three-point shooting that we have been seeing on the road all season long, especially going up against Quinnipiac team that is about 150th with regards to opponent's three-point shooting percentage. I said my total 149, diving in on the under, and at the 6.5 opener, willing to lay that with Quinnipiac. 849, 850 on the betting board. Furman, they play us to Chattanooga. Chattanooga is a underdog of 2 to 2.5 points. Your total on this game, it is 154.5. With Chattanooga, I did set them as a underdog of 2 points. At a 2.5, that is my buy point on them, and we did see an opener of 3 in this one as well. For Furman, they have been significantly better ever since they lost to Division II Anderson College, but for Furman, they still do have their issues when it comes to just overall efficiency. To the credit of Furman, when they're at home, they do a really nice job of being able to guard the three-point line. Opponents are shooting just 30.4% from three-point range against them, but despite that fact, you got a Furman team that overall, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, is 206th in all of college basketball. While Chattanooga is never going to be a team that super duper hangs their head on defense or anything like that, they have climbed into the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're about 196th in the country with this regard, and I really do like the overall camaraderie that you've got with the Chattanooga backcourt. You've got a pair of guys in Trey Bonham, Honoroff. They played for Mr. Earl while they were over at VMI. They're currently combining for 34.4 points per contest. With Bonham, he shoots 44.8% for 3. Huff is able to shoot about 38.5% from distance. They combine for about 6.5 assists and 3.7 turnovers per game as well. And then Sam Alexis, he should be the best rebounder in this game. 11 points, 9 rebounds per game. He's able to pop a few threes as well. And for Furman, this is not a squad that is going to be able to win that battle down low. Furman, in terms of their rebound rate, they're about 127th in all of college basketball. You've been able to have J.P. Peaks be a really nice sort of floor general and do-it-all sort of player, 16.5 points, 4.5 boards, 5 assists. Shoots in that neighborhood about 34% from three-point range, but for Furman, it's been very inconsistent on the glass. It has been a little bit better ever since they've been able to get Marcus Foster back to the fold. At 6'4", he just does it all for the team. 19 points, 7.5 boards, mid-30s three-point shooter, and he's given the team at least 6 rebounds in each of the team's last 5 games. But despite the fact that Furman does have a little bit of a better rebound rate, this is a Chattanooga squad that they're clocking in about 120th with regards to rebound rate, so about as equal as it gets. This is a Chattanooga team that they do have that feature guy down low. Meanwhile, Furman, they really don't have that. It's also a Furman team that's turned the ball over about 12.5 times per contest. They've been trying to be able to get a little bit more out of Carter Witt. He comes in from Wake Forest and has just never been a great three-point shooter. He's been turning the ball over about 2.5 times per contest. He's been a little bit more efficient with it recently, but I do feel like this is a little bit of a tough matchup here for Furman Bunch. Last time they played against Chattanooga, granted that was with Foster just coming back into the fold / being out due to injury. Chattanooga won that game 73-58 on a day where Furman shot 4 of 33 from three-point range. Certainly, I think that they're going to be a little bit warmer than that in this one. This is Chattanooga squad that overall for the season, in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, they are checking in right around about 246th in all of college basketball in that regard. So I do think that we're going to get more points up on the board in this one. Did set my total at a 154. So here at the 154.5, that is my buy point on the under. But with Chattanooga, made them a 2-point underdog. So here at 2.5, taking the points to go along with the under. 851, 852 on the betting board. Illinois State plays us Evansville. Evansville is a 4.5-point underdog. Your total on this game is 137 to 137.5, and I did set Evansville as an underdog of 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Illinois State coming off of a really nice win over Indiana State, and for Illinois State, to their credit, they've been able to do a relatively solid job with regards to their defense. They're a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but for Indiana State, a lot of their defensive triumphs have actually come on the road. They're allowing opponents to shoot 35.5% from three-point range at home. That drops all the way down to about 31.3% away from home. And if you look at Illinois State overall, they're 151st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're giving up 6 cents of points more per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road. And for Evansville, this team has been transformed ever since they've gotten their top scorer and Ben Huma-Riches back at the fold. Huma-Riches was out for quite a few games in Missouri Valley Conference play, and that really did warp their numbers. Prior to him going out of the fold, it was an Evansville team that was relatively average in a lot of aspects in college basketball. Now Evansville finds themselves about 285th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is an Evansville team as well outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and biggest thing for Evansville is that this has not been a good rebound rate team. You do have Usain Toomey, who's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, and Kenny Strawbridge does have quite a bit of versatility. He's able to throw in there like 12 to 13 points, about 5 or so boards per contest, but it is an Evansville team that's about 262nd in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. But it's not like Illinois State has been a world beater with this regard. They are 108th in the country with regards to their rebound rate, but really don't have anyone other than Miles Foster who's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game that has really been dominant down low, and he's not even a guy that necessarily has a whole bunch of size. And getting back to Huma-Riches, the big impact that he's been able to make for this team has been quite noted. He was able to get the team to a 4-game win streak before that was snapped a little bit earlier on during the week. Huma-Riches, 15 points on 44% three-point shooting. He throws in there a block. He gives you about 4.5 rebounds per game. He impacts the game in so many different ways for an Evansville team that without him, they were just really stuck in the mud. I mean, in that month of January, they were failing to be able to get past the 65-point mark in so many of their games, and then he's able to come back to the fold, and boom, all of a sudden they're getting back into the 70s. So I do think that him being back, it is absolutely massive for an Evansville team that while they have lost each of their last 2 games, they lose by 3 on the road against Murray State. They lose by 3 at home against Drake. No shame in those losses whatsoever, and you have to wonder how much Illinois State might potentially cool off after that win that they were able to achieve against Indiana State. They had scored 80 points in that game, but prior to that, they had broken the 70-point plateau in just 1 out of their previous 7 games. So I do think that this is a good spot to see this Illinois State team come back to earth just a little bit. I set my line at 2.5, so going to be willing to take 3+ here with Evansville. And in terms of total, I did set it at 135.5. This is very much a defense-oriented Illinois State team, so looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Evansville. 853, 854 on the betting board. UAB plays us in North Texas. North Texas is an underdog of 2.5 to 3 points. Totals between 132 and 132.5. I say UAB as an underdog of 2 points. I made North Texas a favorite. I'm going to be riding with them outright on the money line for North Texas. They do a really nice job getting their slow grinder style. They're outside the top 325 in terms of total possessions per game, and they just continue to hold up on defense as well. Going up against a UAB team that is outside the top 230 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and they've actually been allowing teams to shoot better from three-point range when they've been at home rather than in a roadside church court venue, and I do think that for North Texas, they're going to be able to do a good job of matching what UAB is able to give you down low, because the Axel Lenborg has been able to give UAB 9+ rebounds per game. But I take a look at this North Texas team, the way that they are just grinding things out on the road, it has been absolutely superb. North Texas is 5th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in a roadside church court environment, giving up fewer points when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. Now, they do go up against a UAB team that I was mentioning, Lenborg, and what he's able to do down low. UAB overall is a top 50 team with regards to percentage of missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound. On offense, that would be 5th overall in the country with regards to all-around rebound rate. But North Texas, they're 99th in the country with this regard. You've had Mule Sissoko be a really nice rim protector with 5 boards, not really giving you a lot of blocks or anything like that, but he does alter a lot of shots. You've also been able to have 2 primary scorers. Aaron Scott, along with Jason Edwards, come to the forefront. Edwards gives you 18.5 points, shoots 37.5% from 3. Scott has been able to shoot about 40% from distance for a North Texas team that overall they are shooting 38% from 3-point range. That is a top 30 mark in all of college basketball. And it's a North Texas team that, even with their 3-point shooting percentage being quite a bit lower when it's on the road, 32.3% away from home compared to 44.3% at home, they make do with the fact that their defense is so much better. As a matter of fact, these two teams played a few weeks ago. Things got a little bit harebrained there. UAB, they were able to pull it off 82-79, but that was also a game that involved overtime in regulation. That was 72-72, and that was just a day where things were just very, very strange with regards to UAB being able to execute on North Texas. I don't think that Lightning is going to be striking twice in this one, and you've been able to get good production as well for North Texas out of Rondell Walker. He's not giving you a lot of scoring with only about 4.5 points per contest, but does give you 5.7 rebounds per game, going against a UAB team that's well outside the top 275 with their 3-point shooting percentage at 31%. Lenborg, along with Ephraim Johnson, are both shooting about 37% from 3-point range. They're really the only 2 scorers out there on the floor that shoot above 33.5% from 3-point range for UAB. It's a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach. You don't have a single guy that gives you north of 12.5 points per contest, with Lenborg along with Eric Gaines both give you 12.5 points per game, but you do have 5 separate guys that do give you at least 7 points per contest, and I do think that with North Texas, they're going to be able to slow this game down. I think that you're going to see less execution on offense than we did the first time around. I do think that North Texas really grinds this thing out against a UAB team that, to their credit, in regulation, because their game against Florida Atlantic went to overtime and their game against North Texas went to overtime, they've given up 72 points or fewer in regulation in each of their last 4 games. So I do think that this total is a little bit overreactionary, because it's opened up at a 135, which would have put me on the under. I set my total 134, but now that we've seen a full 3-point drop in a lot of spots with regards to the total, it is going to put me on the over, because I do expect a little bit of late game fouling, even though I do think that you could be looking good for an under for about 38, 39 minutes. We saw it the last time around. Game go to overtime. We saw quite a bit of late game fouling. So at the 132, I'm going to be looking at the over of North Texas. I like them to be able to win this game outright on the money line. 855, 856 on the betting board. Indiana is going to be playing us in Northwestern. Northwestern is between a 1-point favorite to a 1-point underdog. Books, depending upon which one you're looking at, having a different team being favored, and your total on this game is 137.5. With Indiana, I did set them as a 2-point favorite. Northwestern now has to operate without Ty Berry for the rest of the season, and that's a big deal. This Northwestern bunch did not have a lot of depth to start with, and Berry, he was able to supply the team with 11.5 points per contest and was their top 3-point shooter at 43.5% from distance. Northwestern as a whole, they're shooting 39.4% from 3-point range, top 20 mark in all of college basketball, but it's a Northwestern team that they do take a little bit of a fall off on the road. They shoot about 38% from 3-point range away from home compared to about 40.5% from 3-point range at home, and it's a Northwestern defense that's outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're a team that gambles for turnovers and just frankly does not have a lot down low other than Brooks Barnhizer, who's been able to give you 14 points, 7 rebounds per game. You don't have a single other guy that gives you north of 4.1 rebounds per game, and for Northwestern, they are an offense that they see a drop of 15.2 points per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home with their offensive execution. Meanwhile, for Indiana, they have been executing very badly on offense and on defense. They are 187th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, similar number in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and the big reason why is because they just don't have a lot of guard play in general. They've been having to rely upon Trey Galloway along with Xavier Johnson to really run things, and Johnson just has not been the same facilitator that he was a season ago, while Galloway has had to take the reins at the point guard spot. Does give you 4 assists per contest, but after shooting north of 40% from three-point range a season ago, that's down to about 28.5% this season. Khalil Ware, Malik Renew have really taken over the team. Both of these guys combined for about 15 rebounds, about 4 assists per contest, and with Renew, he's able to give you 16 points per contest. Ware is able to give you more around 14.5 points per game, and Ware is shooting about 45% from three-point range, but just been very clunky, and this team has never really been able to find their rotation all season long. But with Northwestern now having to throw out there some guys that they're just not used to having to throw out there, and with the way that their offense has just really went down the toilet bowl when they've been in road situations, going up against an Indiana team that they themselves not in the world's greatest form. They've given up 73 plus points in each of their last 3 games. It's been an offense that has been stuck in neutral all season long. I do think that Indiana, in a little bit of a game of dysfunction for both sides, gets it done. Northwestern well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, but it is a Northwestern team that's getting completely cashed from three-point range outside the top 275 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, going up against an Indiana team that they're certainly going to offer up a lot of open three-point opportunities. Recognize that Northwestern not quite the same offense when they are away from home, but that said, this is an Indiana team that they're 250th in the country with regards to opponent's three-point shooting percentage. So did set my total 140, looking at the over, and with Indiana, I do think that they win from within. Set them as a 2-point favorite, looking at Indiana on the money line and looking at this total over. 857, 858 on the betting board. SMU plays host to Memphis. Memphis is a 4.5-point underdog. Your total on this game between a 156 and 156.5. I did set my total 151.5. I'm going to be looking at the under with Memphis. We've been noticing that their offense has been cratering a little bit in recent games, but their defense has been able to get hyped up a little bit more as well, and we mentioned this with Rocco Miller. This SMU team has been absolutely tremendous with their defense. A top 35 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, a top 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Going against a Memphis bunch has been very hot and cold in terms of their three-point shooting. Memphis as a whole, they're shooting about 35.2% from three-point range, and Davy Jones has been amazing. 21.5 points, 7.5 boards, 2.2 steals, shooting 40% from three-point range. He's been one of the more invaluable pickups in the transfer portal this entire cycle. That said, this is also a Memphis team that they're quite inconsistent with the way that they give it up on the defensive side of things. They actually are very consistent with regards to their offense. They're only averaging 0.3 of a point fewer per 100 possessions in a road/court venue rather than at home. But for this Memphis team, 134th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are giving up about 6.5 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home. And for SMU, while this is not a team that's necessarily going to light it up from three-point range, or a bunch that they shoot about 34% for three, and much of that is due to Chuck Harris being incredible. He's able to give you 13.5 points, shoots 42.5% from three-point range. He's got a lot of ancillary pieces that they know their role. Like, you've got Ricardo Wright, who's able to give you about 6 points, shoots 36.5% from three-point range. BJ Edwards, he only gives you about 4.5 points per contest, but when he shoots it well, 44% from distance, chips in there, 3.3 assists, 1.2 steals per game, as Reek Phelps has been your do-it-all guard. Not a guy that lights it up from three. As a matter of fact, for SMU, their top 5 scorers, only Harris shoots above 25% from three-point range, but Phelps gives you 14.5 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists for an SMU team that is in the top 50 with regards to rebound rate. And despite the fact that Memphis, they bring in Nequan Tomlin, who's been able to supply you with double figures, 5.5 rebounds per game, they're still a team that's outside the top 125 with regards to rebound rate. Malcolm Dandridge has just never really developed. He gives you 5 boards, block and a half per contest, but a little bit of a clunky guy. And then the backcourt in general, with guys like Dayton Holloway not being able to step up, Caleb Mills being out due to injury. It has just been a big, giant, dysfunctional mess for a Memphis team that has had Javon Quinterly be relatively efficient with 5 assists, did 2.3 turnovers per game, but it's just never come together for this team, and I attribute a lot of it to coaching. I did set Memphis as a underdog of 5.5 points. Here at 4.5, I'm going to be one to lay with SMU. I do think that SMU going to do a good job holding up on defense. We'll recognize that SMU has been falling on a few tougher times recently with their defense, giving up 68 plus in each of their last 5 games, and last time these two teams played, it was a very harebrained game in which you saw Memphis and SMU both not be able to get to 65. I do think that they're going to be a little bit warmer than the grand total of 9 of 41 from three-point range that you saw, but SMU, they do a great job guarding the 3. I think that that'll continue here. So by total 151.5, low and under, and I'm going to be one lay with SMU. 859, 860 on the betting board. St. John's is playing goes to Seton Hall. Seton Hall is an underdog of 6 points with your total 145 to 145. 5.5, and with Seton Hall, I did set them as an underdog of 5 points. So going to be willing to take the 6. Seton Hall is a top 35 team in the country in terms of their rebound rate, and I really like what they've been able to get down low out of Jaden Bediako, who's been able to come in from Santa Clara. He's given the team 8+ rebounds per game. Going up against the St. John's bunch, and they still have Joel Soriano, who's been able to do a nice job at his own right. He's averaging darn near a double-double, giving you north of 12 points, giving you north of 9.5 rebounds per game. And for St. John's, they've cleaned up some of the turnover woes that were ailing them towards the beginning part of the season. They're down to about 11.5 turnovers per game. They're just not really a team that shoots it well from three-point range. They shoot about 33% from the outside. Their top 6 scorers, you've got one guy that shoots above 34% from 3, and that's Joel Soriano. And Joel Soriano is not attempting a lot of threes. You've had Jordan Dingle chip in there 10.5 points per contest. Just feels like being outside that main scoring role that he had at Penn. He just has not been comfortable all season long. Dennis Jenkins, he gives you about 5.5 assists to 2.5 turnovers per game. And for St. John's, to their credit, they're a much better defense at home rather than on the road. They're giving up about 17.5 to 18 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than in a roadside shoot court environment. And Seton Hall, they do give up about 9 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home. They're about 110th in the country with regards to their points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that the duo of Elmir Dawes and Dre Davis going to be able to get going in this one. These two guys are combining for about 28 points per contest. They're both shooting between 35 and 36% for three-point range, while Kadari Richmond has been really struggling with his outside shot, while he's shooting about 20.5% from 3. He provides the team with 16 points, 7 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals per contest. Does turn it over a little bit more than what you'd like, but I do think that they're going to be able to exploit a St. John's team that all season long they've been very inconsistent in the way that they guard the arc. Much better at home. Opponents shoot about 29.6% for three-point range against them at home, 36.5% in a roadside shoot court venue, but with Seton Hall, they're about 178th in the country with this regard, going against a Seton Hall team that has been just very, very strange in terms of their offense, I think is the best way of putting it. It just feels like they have not found their footing with a lot of these guys, even someone like Chris Lovebelm, who's been able to give you 7 boards, nearly 10 points per contest. I think that keeps Seton Hall lively in this game, and I do think that we've got a pretty proper total. It opened up at a 143.5. Now they're up to a 145.5, where you're getting to my buy point on the under. So I total 145, Seton Hall outside the top 150 with regards to total possessions per game, and St. John's just been clunky with their offense. So looking at the under, and we'll take anything north of 5 here with Seton Hall. Now we get my DK Network right to pick. This is 861, 862 on the card. Rutgers hits the road face off against Minnesota. Minnesota opened up a 2.5 point favorite. They're up to being a 4 point favorite. Totals between 131.5 and 132. My right up here is on Minnesota. When I published this, it was at -3. I still do like it at -4. I did make Minnesota a 6 point favorite, and you might note that earlier on I was setting this line more around about a 4 to a 4.5. I did upgrade it to 6 just because I was unsure what we were going to get out of Dawson Garcia a few nights ago. Seeing what I saw out of him, I was able to upgrade him to pretty much being back at full staff, and that's the big reason why we did have a little bit of an adjustment there, and that did put me on over the top on making this the right of play for Minnesota. They have covered all but 3 of their games thus far this season against the spread. It has been absolutely magnificent, and the aforementioned Mr. Dawson Garcia, I do think is going to have himself a nice game. 17.6 boards per contest, and even though this Rutgers team does a really nice job with having Cliff Amarui down low, being able to supply the team with about 9 rebounds per game, in a road/neutral court venue, they allow opponents to grab 31% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That ranks outside the top 280 in all of college basketball, and if this is a nip and tuck game, Rutgers is currently shooting less than 66% at the free throw line. They are outside the top 330 nationally. Now, Minnesota, they're 300th in the country with regards to their free throw shooting percentage at about 68%, but I do like the ancillary scores for this Minnesota team among players that made at least 1 3. 3 out of their top 4 shoot at least 40% from 3, as you've got Mikey Mitchell along with Joseph Allah Joseph and Cam Kersey combining for about 30 to 30.5 points per contest, and they all shoot between 40 and 42% from the outside. And with Christie and Mitchell, they've been nice ancillary facilitators with a combined 5 assists per contest, but Elijah Hawkins and the way that he's been able to take care of the ball is a big reason why Minnesota has been able to elevate this year. 8.2 points, 7.5 assists per contest, and the 7.5 assists per contest that currently leads all of college basketball. And for this Rutgers team, they're just not the same defense when they're away from home. At home, this Rutgers team is just absolutely berserk on defense, and overall this season going into Saturday, Rutgers number 4 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they give up 18.1 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. And for Minnesota, their defense is certainly better when they're at home as well. They're allowing more than 13 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral court venue. They're number 70 in all of college basketball. If you look overall in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for this Rutgers defense, they do a nice job being able to guard the arc at home at about 29.5%. That goes to about 32.2% from distance, so they're still not going to be able to do a bad job on that front. But for Rutgers, it's just all about finding something in the backcourt for this team. They lost so many of their guys from a season ago, and I will say Jeremiah Williams, a transfer that's come in from Temple, he's been able to give the team double figures in his first 4 games out there. He's been able to give them a nice little sign of life, but I still don't think it's enough in this ordeal. You've got Andre Hyatt, who's able to give you about 11.5 points per contest. Rutgers comes in on a 4-game win streak, but this is still a Rutgers team that they shoot as a whole 29.4% from three-point range, and that's really a place where you're able to exploit this Minnesota team. Minnesota, in terms of overall three-point shooting percentage defense, is 235th in all of college basketball, but with Rutgers not being able to put the ball in the basket from the outside, I do think that allows Minnesota to control this game. I did set my line at 6, my DK Network right pick. It is on Minnesota laying the number. Like I said, published just when it was at -3. Still very willing to take the -4, and I did set my total at 132. I'm seeing a 131.5 out there. I think that this is going to be snug enough for late game filling, and as we know with Rutgers, they don't shoot it well at the free throw line. So going to be looking at the 131.5 over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Minnesota with my write-up, and we wrap things up with 863, 864 on the card. UCLA plays Utah. Utah is an underdog of 3 points, and your total on this game, it is 135. I did say UCLA is a 1.5 point favorite. Here at the 3, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Utah. Buyer beware on Utah because this team does give up about 22 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold up in this circumstance against a UCLA team that, to their credit, they are still well outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but has looked much more savory recently. 71 plus points in 3 out of their last 5 games, and this UCLA is just absolutely clobbering teams on defense. They've given up 63 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games. You've got Adam Bona, who's been a really nice rim protector for UCLA. He does rank about 100th in the country with regards to the rebound rate. They've been elevating that as things have been going along, and UCLA does get a nice boost from being at Pauley Pavilion. They give up 11 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral court venue. But for Utah, what I think is going to be able to keep this team very lively is what you've been able to get out of Davion Smith. He's been masterful at the way that he's been able to go out the ball. As Rolly Worcester has been missing for 9 games due to injury, but in comes Smith, giving you nearly 6 assists, 11.5 points per contest, shooting 34.5% from 3, and for Utah, trepidation here with the fact that they do shoot 64.5% of the free throw line, and as a matter of fact, each of their top 5 scorers, they do shoot less than 72% at the charity stripe, but you've got Gabe Madsen, who's able to shoot 40% from 3, giving you 13 points per game, and then Brandon Carlson, he's able to supply you 17 points, 7 boards per contest, and I do think that there is something to perhaps this being a really bad matchup for UCLA. You may recall, UCLA's run began after they lost by north of 40 against Utah. That was a game where absolutely nothing went right for UCLA. We were all wondering if Mick Cronin was going to be on the hot seat or something like that, and ever since then the light has come on for UCLA, a team that they are allowing opponents to shoot about 32.7% from 3-point range. That's 115th in all of college basketball. Sebastian Mack has been able to give the team about 13 points per contest, but not a guy that really shoots it from 3, and the way that you do want to exploit this Utah team is the fact that they do allow opponents in a road/neutral court venue to shoot about 38.2% from 3-point range, but even though UCLA has looked much more competent recently, it's not like this team has great 3-point shooting. Now, the former Utah Ute in Lazar Stefanovic, he's been able to give you a little bit of something from the outside, shooting about 36% from 3, 10.8 points per contest, but he is the only other top 5 scorers that shoot above 31% from 3-point range, and pretty much you've got 2 guys on the roster that shoot above 31% from distance, so I do think that that's going to be a little bit of an issue for UCLA. UCLA, while outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, Utah, a relatively mid-tempo team that has been looking a little bit better with their defense. Their numbers are very much warped by the fact that they played that triple overtime game against Arizona, making their raw numbers look a little bit worse than what they are, and even though Utah has had some struggles on the road, I do think that this is a good matchup for them to be able to hold in there. I do think that Kiba Kita is going to be able to do a relatively solid job on the glass for a Utah team that, while their rebound rate is, well, it's just not quite the same when they're away from home, rather than when they are at home. They are still 88th in the country with regards to this. I do think that they're going to hold up against this UCLA team. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Utah, set them as a 1.5 point underdog, and did set my total at 135.5. This Utah team certainly gives up a whole heck of a awful lot more points on the road, and I do think that they can exploit this UCLA defense as well. So looking at the over, and we'll take 3 here with Utah, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at TuneIn_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, maybe does not matter. So as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning
in. It's the Smucker's Uncrustables podcast with your host, Uncrustables. Okay, today's guest is rough around the edges. Please welcome Crust.
Thanks for having me.
Today's topic, he's round with soft pillowy bread.
Hey.
Filled with delicious PB&J.
Are you talking about yourself?
And you can take him anywhere.
Why'd you invite?
And we are out of time.
Are you really cutting me off?
Uncrustables are the best part of the sandwich. Sorry, Crust.
If this were a Reese's TV ad, you'd be staring at a Reese's peanut butter cup. And sure, my voice is peanut buttery smooth, but still, you need to see the peanut butter cups, right? No? I can really just say Reese's and you'll go get some? Okay. Reese's. 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 Really working, actually. Reese's. Reese's. I'm on to something. Reese's. Reese's. Reese's.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.